Hey guys and welcome back to my channel. This is part 3 of what if Naruto became a demon king and got a harem. Before we begin, don't forget to like, share and subscribe, and also go and support the author, link in description. A light breeze blew through the arena, kicking up a small cloud of dust that passed between the two opponents who were standing on opposite ends of each other. Naruto had a light smile as his his posture was somewhat slouched, and he looked for all the world like he wasn't about to face the kid who was last year's Rookie of the Year. Neji on the other hand was sneering. The long-haired Hyuga Genin opened his mouth to speak. He had found out a long time ago that if you insulted people while remaining as cool and collected as possible, it made your opponents angry and unable to think clearly. And because all Hyuga were taught to read other people, and keep an impassive face at all times, his mocking was made even more effective. However, before he could even get a word out of his mouth, the Hyuga prodigy found a foot being smashed into his face, hard. It felt as if the entire right side of his face had caved in, and his jaw had cracked. There was a moment where his head was snapped to the side, right before he was sent flying backwards. So surprising and painful was this hit that he couldn't even flip himself around to land on his feet, and ended up eating dirt. Neji skidded back across the ground for several feet, leaving a decent-sized trench in his wake before skidding to a stop. For several seconds he just lay there, wondering what the hell had hit him. What he hadn't seen and the entire audience had, or to be more accurate, seen but couldn't keep track of, was Naruto. The blonde had noticed Neji had been about to open his mouth, and already knew the overrated Hyuga boy had a propensity for flapping those gums of his. So he had decided to act before Neji could say anything, making liberal use of Shundo to appear in front of the long-haired Genin and plant a boot in his face. The speed technique wasn't as effective as it usually was. Naruto figured it was about 4 times slower than his normal Shundo. Not that he hadn't expected something like that. Naruto was not using his Yuki, as that was poisonous to any human that was not a Jinchuriki, and he didn't want to kill the prick, just make him suffer, and even they would have trouble with his Yuki. Instead he was using his human chakra, which while much stronger than any Genin and on par with a Kage, was nowhere near as vast as his Yuki. I can't use too many of those, he decided as he checked his chakra stores. That one move had used 1/4 of his reserves. That was the sole reason only high A or S-class demons could use Shundo, because it required vast reserves of power that most demons simply didn't have. I'll rely on my normal techniques from now on. Still, I'm rather pleased how this match has started out. Not wanting to lose his advantage, Naruto blurred as he ran towards the just now getting up Neji. The older Genin saw him coming, and if the slow widening of his eyes and the dilation of his pupils were any indication, he was rather surprised by the blonde's speed. Neji was only just able to block the blonde's first attack, a palm thrust to the chest. He used the fluid style of the Hyuga clan, the Jiyukin, to redirect the attack. At the same time he poured chakra into Naruto's arm, knowing that even if it wouldn't be as effective since he had yet to get the chance to turn on his Byakugan, it would still hurt the blonde attacking him. However, once more to Neji's shock, it seemed as if Naruto was completely unaffected by the invading chakra. The blonde merely twisted his body and launched a reverse heel kick, one which Neji dodged effectively by moving to the side. As the blonde continued to attack, Neji continued to block. Even without his eyes he could see the boy's movements, even if just barely. Little did the Hyuga prodigy know that all of Naruto's attacks were merely a distraction. The blonde Uzumaki's true plan came to the front when several hands sprung from the ground and grabbed onto Neji's feet and legs. Said boy looked down in shock. What? He didn't have a chance to say any more than that as Naruto grabbed the boy by the head and launched a devastating attack with his knee into the boy's face. The clones disappeared and once again the Hyuga prodigy was sent flying. Birth of the new demon king. Up in the stands everyone was staring in utter shock as Uzumaki Naruto, the dead last of his class and who many people thought of as either the loser, or the demon, depending on their prejudice against him, beat the kid being hailed as the greatest prodigy to a bloody pulp. Holy shit, Katetsu said, his voice denoting just how shocked he was, if the currently gaping jaw he had didn't. Uzumaki is pounding the Hyuga into the ground. Really? I hadn't noticed, replied Izumo in a dry tone. Though from the way his wide eyes never left the battle, it was clear he was just as surprised as his partner. I think we may have to reevaluate our opinion of the kid, he's nothing like I expected. Kami, he's brutal. Oh man, this is gonna ruin me, Katetsu whined. I out nearly 1,000 Ryu on the Hyuga to win. That should just teach you not to gamble, said Izumo in a chiding tone. Katetsu just slumped in his seat. Whatever. Birth of the new demon king. Every single Hyuga in attendance winced as they watched their prized shinobi receive an earth-shattering punch to the stomach that sent him flying backwards, where he crashed into the wall and left a large crater. Neji Oni-san is getting really beaten, said a small little Hyuga girl. Hanabi was the little sister of Hinata. She had dark brown hair with long bangs, and white eyes, a common trait shared by all Byakugan users. She was wearing an armless blue versus neck shirt with a mesh blouse underneath and blue shorts. I was told no one could beat a Hyuga in taijutsu. Isn't our Jiyukin supposed to be the best? Father. She looked up at her father, Hyuga Hiyashi, who was the current clan head of the Hyuga clan. He had long dark brown hair and featureless white eyes like all members of his clan. He was wearing very traditional, loose-fitting robes with a cloak. The man didn't even look at his youngest child as he stared in shock at seeing the son of his brother and the best Hyuga in generations get decimated. Birth of the new Demon King. Can't do much when you can't even activate those white eyes of yours, can you? Taunted Naruto as he launched a barrage of fists Neji, who grimaced as he did his best to block them. Several managed to get through, and each one made Neji feel like he was being hit with a steel bar. Even those that barely touched him hurt worse than anything. Not even Lee could hit as hard as the blonde before him could. Neji was once again launched away when Naruto managed to sneak a foot in between his ribs. The long-haired Hyuga winced as he skidded back, falling to his knees the moment he stopped. Neji managed to lift a hand to wipe off the blood that had accumulated near his mouth, spitting the amount that was in his mouth out as he glared fiercely at the boy in front of him. Everyone knows the Byakugan is the most powerful dojutsu in the world. You're just afraid to face off against me at my full power. Naruto chuckled. Is that your way of trying to trick me into letting me use your eyes? He grinned and cocked his head to the side. Still, I don't want anyone saying I didn't fight you at your best. Very well, I'll let you use those eyes of yours, and I'll even going one step above. Here, catch. Neji blinked as his hand instinctively caught the tiny object that Naruto had thrown at him. What is this? He asked, looking at the small green bean in his hand. It's called a senzu bean, Naruto said. They have amazing regenerative abilities, by using your chakra to promote healing. Eating a senzu bean can heal even people who are on the verge of death. They are very rare. In fact, I only know one place that grows them. And it's not in the human world, the blonde said to himself. Senzu beans were actually grown in Makai, and were a secret of the Kitsune clan. Kyuubi had told him that she had created the senzu bean by splicing several different plants and herbs she had found in both Makai and the human world. And only she knew how to make them. How do I know it's not poisoned? Asked Neji with a sneer. Ha ha ha, are you serious? Asked Naruto, laughing the boy's comment off. I don't need to poison you to beat you, I've been kicking your ass for the past few minutes just fine without help. Of course, you can just toss it if you want. Though if you're going to do that I would rather you give it back. Those things are pretty rare after all. Neji grimaced as he realized that Naruto was right. Much as he didn't want to admit it, the blonde was beating him handily. He placed the bean in his mouth and swallowed. The effects were almost instantaneous. All of his wounds regenerated in an instant, his broken bones healed, his cuts left his body, all in all it felt as if he had not just had his ass kicked. However, rather than be grateful, Neji gave Naruto an unpleasant grin. You're going to regret healing me. Now that I'm at full strength you stand no chance. It seems fate is on my side. Hey, you think so? Alright Hyuga Neji, let's see if you can beat me. Naruto reached up to his face and pulled off his sunglasses, crushing them in his hand before he let them drop. The grin he was wearing threatened to split his face in half. Let's test your dojutsu against mine. Birth of the new Demon King. All around the stadium people were talking about the eyes of Uzumaki Naruto. Not many people knew of the Rinnegan, the most powerful dojutsu, great three-eye techniques, in the world and the one that was said to hold mastery over all the world's jutsu. Some wondered if this was some kind of trick of the demon. After all, there was no way the Kyuubi brat could have a dojutsu. Was there? For those who were in the know however, and knew the legend of those eyes, stunned would be too small a word to describe what they were feeling. Many couldn't help but wonder, how did Uzumaki Naruto, the dead last, the loser, the demon of Konoha, gain the most powerful of all 3 Daisen dojutsu? None were more stunned than Jiraiya, who had hidden himself in the very back row of the stadium to see his godson. I can't believe it, he muttered with a voice that would have let anyone near him know that he was in a state of shock. Twice in a lifetime, it shouldn't be possible. How could he have the Rinnegan? Birth of the new Demon King. Likewise, up in the cage booth, Sarutobi was in a similar state. The Rinnegan, he breathed, feeling like he had just gone through 3 heart attacks. When did he get that? How did he get it? The disguised Orochimaru was also having a hard time coming to grips with what he was seeing. How is this possible? He has the Rinnegan. The same eyes as the Raikudo Sennin, who was said to have given us jutsu. The same eyes as him. He cursed his stupidity in writing the boy off now. The Sharingan was a pittance compared to the power of the Rinnegan, the ability to master all 5 chakra elements. With that power there was no telling what he could accomplish. I can still get him if I play my cards right. It may not be now, but those eyes will be mine after the Chunin exams. Birth of the new Demon King. Asuma, are those what I think they are? Asked Kurenai, her voice in a state of shock. I don't know, what do you think they are? Asked Asuma. There was no sarcasm in the man's words, he too couldn't believe what he was seeing. The Rinnegan. Yep. Looks like it. I don't get it, said Sakura. Who cares if Naruto Baka has that Rinne thingy? It's nothing compared to Sasuke-kun's Sharingan. And yet again the little slag opens that big flap of her before she knows what she's talking about, said Anko. Listen up, Pinky. The Rinnegan is the most powerful of the three great dojutsu, more powerful than both the Sharingan and Byakugan combined. It is said that the wielder of the Rinnegan can completely master all 5 forms of nature transformation that form the basis of ninjutsu. It was said that in times when the world is in disorder, a person is sent down from the heavens to become either a god of creation, who will calm the world, or a destroyer, who reduce everything to nothing. Very little else is known about those eyes, but the legend goes that the man who gave us chakra, the man who due to his power and desire for peace was known as the Kono Yo no Kyushishu, the savior of the world. Sakura gawked for a moment, before huffing and turning away. Sasuke-kun's still better. Anko, Asum and Kurenai all rolled their eyes at the girl, no longer caring if they got to her or now. As far as they were concerned, Sakura was a lost cause. Birth of the new Demon King. What are those eyes? Asked Neji as he stared into the dark blue eyes with the silver ripple pattern. They're called the Rinnegan, a dojutsu that was said to have belonged to the Raikudo Sennin, the man who brought us ninjutsu, Naruto said, smirking at the look of shock upon his opponent's features. Now, I didn't heal you just so you could gawk at me. Come, Naruto lifted his hand and made a get over here gesture. Neji hesitated for a moment before charging towards Naruto, who stood completely still. When Neji was less than a foot away, Naruto pointed his palm towards the boy and muttered, Shinra Tensei. The Hyuga genius only had enough time to see the flare of chakra before he was sent flying backwards. He slammed into wall, feeling as if he had just been hit by an Akamichi trying to run him over. He barely had time to even register just how much pain he was in before he heard the blonde mutter, Bansho Tenon, heavenly attraction of all creation, and Neji was once again flying. This time he came soaring towards Naruto as if someone had hooked his chest with a fishing line and was reeling him in. Naruto cocked his fist back, and the moment Neji came within range, smashed it right into the older genin's gut. Neji hacked up blood as his stomach caved in on itself. He flew off the fist, smashing into the ground and skidding along before coming to a stop. He would have tried to get up, but it felt like all of his internals had been liquidized. He couldn't anything save the pain he received from the punch. As his vision began fading out, Naruto came into view. Huh, the blonde said, that smirk still on his face. Looks like having your dojutsu turned on didn't change a single thing, did it? Those were the last words Neji heard before darkness claimed him. Naruto yawned as the fight finished. He couldn't help but find fighting humans to be boring, even those Saint Beast guys gave him a better fight, and they were pathetic. Well, except for Suzaku, he was pretty decent, though half of that was on account of Naruto being arrogant. Oh well, can't pick all your fights. He looked over at the proctor who was currently gaping at him, face pale like he had seen a ghost. Yo, Proctor-san, how about calling the match? Genma blinked several times as the words registered. Right. Shusa, Uzumaki Naruto. The silence was so vast it was like you could hear a pin drop. Everyone was so shocked by what had transpired that no one even knew what to think. Naruto shrugged as no one clapped. He didn't rightly care what these people thought. Hundreds of years from now, he would barely even remember these faces. He was beginning to walk off the arena floor when it started, clapping coming from the cage booth. Soon enough the fire daimyo, who had come to view the village's talent, began clapping as well. Applause began coming in from other areas. Naruto could make out Asuma, Kurenai and Anko clapping enthusiastically, with Anko even yelling, "Way to go Gaki!" at the top of her lungs. He thought it was odd that she was so psyched about him winning, but shrugged it off as irrelevant. Smiling, Naruto held a hand in the air. The crowd began to roar its approval. Truthfully, their applause didn't mean much to him. Only the approval of the few people he cared about in this village really counted. Still, he couldn't deny the feeling was nice. He looked up at the cage booth and looked at the Sandame, who was clapping and smiling proudly at him. He nodded once before turning around and making his way up to the fighter's booth. As soon as Naruto walked into the fighter's booth, any and all conversation that had been taken place stopped. Everyone turned to stare at him, expressions ranging from shocked to fearful. He couldn't hold in a chuckle when he noticed that no one could meet his gaze, even Gaara was unable to keep his stare. He walked over to where Shino was standing and greeted the other genin with a nod. Shino returned the nod with one of his own before going back to staring at nothing. Birth of the new Demon King. Neji lost. Tenten couldn't help but rub her eyes several times, thinking it would fix her vision, because there was no way this could have happened. Neji lost. Neji never lost. Ever since they had been genin, Neji had never lost a match, never lost his cool. Neji, never, lost. I can't believe Neji lost. What's more, he did not only lose, but he lost to the dead last. An extremely powerful dead last who just beat Neji in an almost straight-up taijutsu match. A dead last who, if the mutterings around her were to be believed, held the most powerful dojutsu in the entire world. A dead last who in the span of 1 week went from a skinny loser with a loud mouth, to a hunk with muscles on his muscles and a typical bad boy attitude to boot. Just who are Uzumaki Naruto? Birth of the new Demon King. Oh man, Raikage-sama is not going to like hearing about this. Hearing about what? That one of the Hyuga he's so set on getting just got his ass kicked. Or that Konoha now has a person wielding the single most powerful dojutsu to have ever existed. Both. Well, there's not much we can do. We'll just inform Raikage-sama of this latest development and let him figure out what to do. Right. Birth of the new Demon King. Ha. Anko crowd as she danced around in her seat. It was rather disturbing, or highly erotic, depending on which gender you asked, to see the woman squirming and dancing in her seat. Did you see that, Nai-chan? Did you? I knew that Gaki was going places after I saw him during the prelims. Yes, I saw what happened, same as you. Kurenai rolled her eyes at her friend's joy. I'm not sure what you're getting so worked up over, you look like someone just gave you Orochimaru's head on a silver platter. The red-eyed beauty was the only person besides the Hokage who could even mention the hubby Sanin around Anko without getting her head bitten off. Yeah, I just feel this connection with the kid, Anko said, calming down. We're the same, him and I, you know. I do. If anyone could understand how Anko felt, it would be Naruto, who was even more hated than Konoha's snake mistress. You know, I was thinking, seeing as he did such a good job, maybe I should give him a reward. Anko. Kurenai looked scandalized as Anko licked her lips. She knew her friend was just joking, or at least partially joking. It would surprise most people who didn't know, but Anko was a virgin. Another surprise would be that Kurenai, who most considered to be colder than ice towards men and a hater of perverts, wasn't. What? Said Anko, grinning as she noticed the blushes on the faces of damn near every girl within hearing distance. The little Hyuga girl had already passed out from a nosebleed. You can't tell me you weren't thinking of fucking him as well. I mean, look at the Gaki. He's got muscles on his muscles, and you know what the Anbu have said about his stamina. Kurenai blushed a deep shade of red. Naruto's stamina was rather legendary, able to keep the Anbu chasing him after a prank for hours on end. No one knew the true limits of the blonde's stamina. If that same endurance could be applied into the bedroom. Damn it, Anko, Kurenai shouted, shaking her head. Why do you do this to me? You said something very similar about the Yondaime when he was still around too. And besides, Naruto's what? 12, 13. He's way too young for us to even be thinking about. The red-eyed woman trailed off and blushed at what she had been about to say. Ah, don't be such a prude, Nai-chan. Anko chirped with a laugh. He's a shinobi, isn't he? That means he is more or less an adult. Old enough to kill, old enough to drink, old enough to fuck. Besides, look at that body, does that look like a 13-year-old body to you? Asuma listened to the two women talking and sighed. Maybe Shikamaru was onto something when he said women are troublesome. Unfortunately for him, his words must have been too loud, as both Anko and Kurenai stopped talking and turned to him with full-on glares and killing intent. Damn, I should learn to keep my mouth shut. Birth of the new Demon King. Will Uchiha Sasuke and Sabaku no Gaara get down here for the next match? Called Genma after the nurses had managed to get Hyuga Neji on a stretcher and left. Genma actually felt pretty bad for the kid. While getting pulverized like that would be tough for anyone to cope with, getting the crap beaten out of you with thousands of people watching was just humiliating. A few feet away, Sabaku no Gaara appeared in a swirl of sand, arms crossed in his standard pose. His face held a look of impatience about it, though even that was barely visible to others due to how impassive his face was. The crowd began to grow restless when Sasuke had yet to show up. Many were wondering where the last loyal Uchiha was. Boos began to sound from the people who had come here just to watch the Uchiha fight. Uchiha Sasuke, come down to the arena floor or you will be disqualified this instant. Genma said again after 5 more minutes of waiting. Birth of the new Demon King. Sir, Uchiha Sasuke still hasn't shown up, Rado whispered into his Hokage's ear. The crowd is starting to get restless. Sarutobi sighed in both disappointment and worry. Rado was right. The Hokage could hear boos being shouted out. People wanted action, especially after seeing such an incredible battle from the previous match. It seems we have no choice, Sarutobi said. Uchiha Sasuke is hereby disqualified from the Chunin exams for being late. The Kazekage turned to look at him. Hokage Dono, I think you should reconsider. Many of the people here came to see the Uchiha heir. Not showcasing him could cost you a lot of business. The aging Hokage looked at the Kazekage, or to be more accurate, his disguised student. He pondered the benefits of bumping up Sasuke's battle for later in the day. However, he remembered the message that Naruto had given him. When Uchiha Sasuke is late, and considering who his sensei as we both know he will be, disqualify him. That will disrupt Orochimaru's plans long enough for you to somehow get a message to your forces to let them know what is going on and prepare. Yes, the Sandaime decided that Naruto's idea held more merit than Orochimaru's. I had not realized you cared about how much business Konoha received, Kazekage-sama, Sarutobi said in a slightly chilling tone. It was the kind that you let know you had stepped over a line, and going any further would be unwise. If Uchiha Sasuke cannot show up on time for something as fundamental as an exam for his own promotion, then I can't expect him to show when something even more important comes up. Thus, Uchiha Sasuke is not qualified to be a Chunin anyways. Uchiha Sasuke is to be disqualified. He looked over at his Jonin guard, relay that to Genma. Hi, said the Jonin before he disappeared in a swirl of leaves. Damn that old man. Orochimaru seethed at the Hokage's words. Of all the times for him to grow a backbone, it has to be now. He calmed down after a few seconds. He could still make this work. I will have to change my plans, but that's alright, this could be an opportunity for me. That Hyuga boy was not able to give Naruto-kun a proper test of his abilities, and I doubt the other genin here will be able to from what I have seen. However, Gaara can. Yes, the plan was perfect. He would use Naruto and Gaara's battle as the new stage on which his invasion would begin. He might even get lucky and Naruto would be weak enough from fighting Gaara for capture. I understand, Hokage Dono, he said to Sarutobi. Forgive my impertinence, I was just so excited to see how my Gaara stacked up against a shinobi of Sasuke's caliber that I forgot myself. Sarutobi nodded. It happens to the best of us, I'm afraid. Now, let's get the matches started. Birth of the new Demon King. Due to not showing up on time, Uchiha Sasuke has been officially disqualified. Boos were met with Genma's announcement, and from the look on Gaara's face he also seemed displeased that he would not get to spill someone's blood. The next match will be between Sabaku no Kankuro and Aburame Shino. Will both contestants please come down to the arena floor? Birth of the new Demon King. Shit, this isn't good, thought Kankuro. I don't want to show off any of my new abilities with Crow before the invasion starts. Proctor-san. Kankuro called out. I forfeit. More boos were met with that announcement, with many of the people beginning to get angry. They had come here to watch people fight, yet only one had happened so far and the one everyone had been waiting for had been cancelled. Needless to say, Kankuro's forfeiting had not gone over well with the people watching. However, Genma merely called out the next two people who would be fighting, those being Tiamiri and Shikamaru. Tamari opened up her fan and flew down to the arena, making a big show of her abilities. Shikamaru on the other hand. What are you still doing up here, Shika? Asked Naruto as he looked at the lazy genin with his Rinnegan eyes. This is all too troublesome, Shikamaru said, yawning. I think I'm just going to forfeit. If you even think of forfeiting, I am going to kick your ass to the moon and back, Shikamaru. Actually no, Naruto smirked as a thought came to him. If you don't compete, I'm going to tell Yoshino-san that you quit the Chunin exams before your first match. Shikamaru paled. You wouldn't. He knew what would happen to him if his mom heard he quit before he even fought. She would use her special frying pan no jutsu, copyright patented, and beat his ass so hard it would make anything the blonde in front of him could do pale in comparison. Every Nara feared that jutsu, which had been specifically created to get a lazy male Nara off their ass and work. Naruto gave the lazy boy a very disturbed grin. The fact that his eyes were being overshadowed by his hair and all he could see were those creepy swirl eyes only made it worse. You are obviously forgetting who you're dealing with. Remember, I'm the guy who dyed the entire Hyuga clan's clothing bright orange and hung their underwear in the streets of Konoha. The guy who snuck into Anbu HQ and put itching powder in their clothes. The guy who... Alright, I get it. Jeesh, I'll go fight the troublesome woman, ya damn troublesome blonde, Shikamaru grumbled. Good. Oh, and Shika. Shikamaru turned back from where he had been walking to see that creepy smile on the blonde's face. Make sure you work hard or I'll still tell Yoshino you were slacking off. Shikamaru gulped but nodded as he scurried from the room. Naruto watched the lazy genin go and leaned against the railing to look out at the arena with a content smile on his face. This should be interesting. Birth of the new Demon King. Tamari waited with a scowl on her face as she watched Shikamaru move towards the ring at a snail's pace. Seriously, it had taken this kid like 15 minutes just to walk onto the arena floor. Get your ass over here before I beat the crap out of you with my fan, lazy bones. She shouted in a threatening tone. Whatever, troublesome blonde, Shikamaru muttered as he stopped 2 meters away from Tamari. It was hard to tell since his typical slouched posture and lazy expression hadn't left him, but the few who knew Shikamaru could tell he would rather be anywhere than where he was. Are both fighters ready? Asked Genma. His answer was for Tamari to fully unsheath her fan and for Shikamaru to just let out a lazy yawn. He sweat dropped. Right, well, Hajime. Kameidachi number jutsu, sickle weasel technique. Tamari launched her jutsu the very moment Genma started the match. She swiped her fan at the Nara Genin and launched a powerful gale of cutting winds. The wind tore up the land as it headed for Shikamaru, smashing into him and sending him flying backwards. Only for him to disappear in a puff of smoke and a log to take his place. "Where are you?" shouted Temari as she looked around the clearing with narrowed eyes. "Come out or I'll force you out." "Man, this is so troublesome," thought Shikamaru as he crouched down behind a thicket of trees. He looked up at the clouds that were lazily passing by inside. "Man, sometimes I wish I was a cloud. Just floating along, going wherever the breeze takes me. That's my style. I just don't like putting effort into doing anything troublesome. The only reason I became a ninja was to do whatever I wanted. Gah, who knew this would be so much work? Maybe he should just quit the Chunin exams now. That would show everyone, it's not like he cared what these people thought. All I ever wanted in life was to marry a regular girl who isn't too ugly and not too pretty. Have 2 children, first a girl, then a boy. Retire after my daughter is married and my son becomes a successful ninja, and spend the rest of my life playing shogi or go. Then die of old age before my wife. Nara Shikamaru, like his father before him, the famous Nara Shikaku, and his father before him, Nara Shikamu, held the same uninspiring dream to be relatively average shinobi. Which was why it was so unfortunate that all males of the Nara clan held a vast intelligence and propensity for planning innumerable strategies against superior opponents. Fine. If that's how you want to do it. Temari made another swipe with her fan. Kamedachi number jutsu. The large gale of cutting winds tore into the trees, slicing through many of the branches like they were made of paper. Shikamaru was thankful that he was hidden off to the side of the trees that got hit. Of course, as was his lot in life, Temari sent another wind jutsu into the tree line, this one getting dangerously close to hitting him. It's troublesome but I've got no choice, Shikamaru thought to himself as he made several hand signs. Temari's next jutsu slammed into the area he was in, covering the entire spot in a large cloud of dust. Temari looked at the devastation her jutsu had caused and smirked. Hey, that ought to take care of him. What? The smirk left her face as a shadow shot out of the dust, moving towards her at a fast pace. Acting quickly, Temari folded her fan and began to backpedal as she attempted to keep away from the shadow that was chasing her. It was surprisingly fast, and almost got her. Thankfully it stopped, its form staggering, before it was forced to retract. Temari used her fan to draw a line where the shadow stopped. I see your angle now, Temari said, her eyes narrowing as she looked at Shikamaru, who was holding a hand seals. You almost had me for a second there, you're pretty clever. With that Kajimane jutsu of yours, you can manipulate any shadow you're in. The wall's shadow for instance, or the trees. But there's a limit, isn't there? No matter how far you stretch it, your shadow can only move so far. Isn't that right? Shikamaru's face twisted into a grimacing smile. You got me. Temari smiled as she found out the weakness of his jutsu. He could only stretch his shadow to a total of 15 meters give or take. So long as she stayed out of his range, he wouldn't be able to touch her. Staying over 15 meters away from him meant she would have to use long-range attacks, but those were her specialty so she wouldn't have any problems. This battle was as good as over. Shikamaru sighed as he closed his eyes and put his hands together in a circle pattern. Temari and everyone else that didn't know Shikamaru wondered if the new hand sign was some kind of jutsu. Only Asuma and his team knew otherwise. Birth of the new Demon King. What kind of hand sign is that? Kankuro wondered out loud as he too saw what Shikamaru was doing. Is he going to use a new jutsu? Doubtful, said Naruto, who had heard the Katsuta Genin from where he was standing. Kankuro turned to his, shuddering a bit as those creepy eyes came into view. The blonde saw this and grinned. That's not one of the standard 12 hand signs that ninja use for jutsu. I doubt Shikamaru knows any jutsu that are not of his clans, and all of those rely on a specific hand sign. Even if that was a seal of some kind, it wouldn't do any good. The only jutsu that rely on hand seals that don't follow the standard 12 zodiac system are the Kekkei Genkei elemental jutsu, such as Hyoden Ice or Yoden Lava. No, this is something else. HMPH, Kankuro snorted as he turned away from the blonde. Whatever he's doing it won't matter in the end. Now that Temari has figured out his range, that kid is toast. I wouldn't sell Shikamaru out just yet, Naruto warned with a grin. Everyone still in the fighter's booth looked at him. He may be the laziest bastard I've ever known, but Shikamaru is probably the most intelligent person you'll ever meet. That might not mean much when it comes to a straight-up fight, but in the world of ninja, when strategy is the most important factor in battle, he's got it where it counts. When did you become so smart? Asked Ino. Naruto turned to his fellow blonde and gave her a stare, his left eyebrow partially raised. Ino blushed and looked away, unable to meet his gaze. What I mean is, you've never said anything this, well, intelligent in, like ever. Naruto shrugged. I was never stupid, Ino. Uneducated. Maybe. Probably. But then, I never had any parents in my life to teach me how to do basic things like reading and writing, so naturally I struggled when it came time to enter the academy. Unlike everyone else, I was still trying to teach myself these basic skills when you and all of your friends had parents who would help you. By the time I had caught up to everyone else in those skills, I was so far behind that I just didn't care anymore. Oh, Ino's face fell at his words. Truthfully, she had never really thought of how badly Naruto would have had things as an orphan. She only knew him as the troublemaking kid her parents told her to stay away from. Thinking back on it, she remembered that when their sensei had first asked Naruto to come up and read, her fellow blonde had struggled with it, and that had been the start of when people in her class made fun of him. Sorry, I guess I didn't realize how hard that would be. The Rinnegan bearer looked at Ino with slight surprise. He hadn't interacted with her much, but she had never been very nice to him. Then again, no one his age had been nice to him. The closest people he could consider friends when he was younger were Kiba, Choji and Shikamaru, and that was only when they were doing something Iruka wouldn't approve of. Once school was out, they were the same as everyone else. It's fine, he said. Most people never think about what it's like being an orphan, especially kids. They usually tend to take things for granted, like having parents to teach them, help them with their problems, or even just tuck them in at night. Most think what they have is what everyone else has, and don't really realize that some of us are less fortunate than others. Everyone looked at Naruto with varied reactions. Some of the genin looked like they were reevaluating their opinions of him, a process that had already happened several times in the past month since the blonde's change. A few, like Ino, couldn't help but feel bad about how they had treated him in the past, without even thinking about how hard it would be to try and do things without having parents to help you. Gaara was likewise thinking about the blonde Uzumaki. So he is like me. He has had to rely on himself, and yet, he doesn't fight for himself. What is it that makes him so strong? Why is mother afraid of him? Birth of the new Demon King. Shikamaru opened his eyes. They looked different this time. No longer were they a pair of lazy eyes that didn't seem to care about anything. Instead, they held a look of determination. It was an odd change, and only Tamari was close enough to see it. So you do have some fighting spirit, Tamari said with a smirk as she opened her fan. I was beginning to wonder. And now that you seem to be taking this seriously, I think it's time we get the fun started. Kamedachi no Jutsu. The blonde Suna Kunoichi launched another fierce gale of cutting winds at Shikamaru, who was forced to cover his eyes as the jutsu came at him. He pulled a kunai out of his pouch and quickly ran towards another tree. Tamari scowled. Hiding isn't going to do you any good. Shikamaru grit his teeth as the wind howled around him. Gashes appeared on the trees and several branches were sliced off, with a few of the smaller ones hitting him in the face. Acting as quickly as he could, he began taking off his jacket, leaving him in just his mesh shirt. The windstorm soon died down and Shikamaru got ready to make his first move. Come on out, coward, Tamari said as she threw another Kamedachi no Jutsu at the tree line. Troublesome woman, Shikamaru thought to himself as he tossed a kunai through the dust cloud. What? Tamari's eyes widened as she saw the kunai sail towards her. She jumped out of the way, not wanting to use a jutsu on a single kunai. Before she could even begin thinking she was in the clear, however, another kunai came at her, this one having been hidden in the shadows of the first. Like the previous one, Tamari dodged this one too, moving to the side and letting it sail past her. She looked back towards where she knew Shikamaru to be hiding and saw his shadow coming towards her. She smirked, thinking she was safe because she had already gotten his range down and was still behind the line. Only the shadow moved past the line. Tamari's eyes widened as she jumped back, the shadow stopped. She looked over at Shikamaru who was smirking at her. You know, you're pretty quick on your toes, he commented idly. Now I get it. You weren't hiding, you were biding your time. The longer the shadows on, the more range you have on your jutsu. She figured that was the correct answer because Shikamaru just smirked at her. This meant there was a new variable to Shikamaru's reach. The longer this went on, the more reach he would have. She would have to end this quickly or he may end up being capable of reaching her anywhere. A sudden shout of, Tamari above you, caused her to look up. There was something floating in the air. What is that? As it came closer, she realized it was Shikamaru's jacket. Her eyes widened as it cast a shadow on the ground, right over her opponent's. Crap, she shouted as she jumped back. Just in time, Shikamaru's shadow began to expand and chase her again. It stopped at about a meter. Tamari realized she would have to end this soon and was just about to launch another wind jutsu when she heard something. A sizzling sound coming from behind her. Turning her head, her eyes widened as she saw the kunai she had let pass her directly behind her, a small explosive note attached to it and currently sizzling. Reacting on pure instinct, she jumped back just as the note sizzled out. Yet it didn't explode. What? She questioned, right before she felt her body freeze. Moving her eyes down, as it was the only part of her body she could move at the moment, she saw that Shikamaru's shadow had caught her. They roved back over to the kunai with the explosive note, which still had not gone on. I see. The explosive note was a dud. You threw that first one, knowing I wouldn't waste chakra on a single kunai. I would let it stop in front of me, but you kept one hidden in the shadows, making it so that I would instinctively dodge it. After that you used your jacket to extend the range of your jutsu, all the while bringing me closer to the kunai I dodged. When I heard the sizzling sound, I would think it was a real explosive note, and would be forced to jump back. Right into your shadow. Yep, you definitely catch on quick, Shikamaru said with a lazy grin. And now this is checkmate. He began to walk to the center of the arena, forcing Tamari to follow his movements. The two stopped in the middle of the ring, Tamari struggling to move every step of the way. Shikamaru raised his right arm into the air, forcing her to do the same. Everyone held their breath, the tension was so thick you could cut it with a kunai. The entire crowd was now watching in anticipation, wondering what Shikamaru's next move would be. Okay, I forfeit. A mass round of face faults accompanied Shikamaru's announcement. What? Stammered Tamari, her eyes wide and a look of shock evident on her features. I'm almost out of chakra, Shikamaru explained. This technique will only last 15 more seconds before I run out, then I'd have no chakra left to fight with. I don't know about you, but I don't really feel like going up against guys like Naruto and your younger brother when I don't have any chakra to use. As he finished speaking, the shadow that had Tamari obeying his every will withdrew from her shadow. See. Shusa. Sabak no Tamari. There was no clapping as Shikamaru began walking towards the arena exit, leaving a stunned Tamari behind. The lazy genin looked up at Naruto, who was staring back at him with those new eyes of his. Truth be told, I still have around half my chakra left. But if what Naruto said is true, then I'm going to need it for later. Birth of the new Demon King. Flashback. Hey Shikamaru, Shino, mind if I speak with you two for a moment? Shikamaru looked over at Naruto for a moment before shrugging. As he and Shino made their way over, Ino made a bid to follow them. Sorry Ino, Naruto said, however, this is a guys meeting only. What do you mean a guys meeting? Ino said with a loud huff. Why can't I listen to what you have to say as well? Oh, do you want me to tell you about how I think Tamari should fight topless? Asked Naruto, just loud enough that Tamari could hear him. He grinned when both her and Ino's faces turned beet red, whether from embarrassment or anger didn't matter, it was still amusing. You pervert, Ino shouted, her face was red and there was anger in it. But if the way she was glaring at Tamari were any indication, it was not anger at him. At least not all at him. Thankfully she didn't try to hit him. He would have had hurt her if she did. You're just saying that because you want me to say the same thing about you, Naruto replied airily. He left the angry blonde and walked into the hall. So what is this about Naruto? Asked Shikamaru, noticing the sudden change in the blonde's demeanor. He looked a lot more serious now that he wasn't in the fighter's booth. Naruto looked around for a moment before leaning in, forcing the other two Konoha genin to do the same. Sometime during the Chunin exam Suna and Oto are going to launch an invasion of Konoha. Shikamaru's eyes went wide, and though no one could see Shino's features, a buzzing sound could be heard coming from his Kikai bugs. I want you two to be careful not to expend too much chakra in these fights. You're going to need it when all is said and done. How do you know this? Asked Shikamaru, his tone no longer lazy. While he may not like having to work, he knew that there was a time to be lazy and a time to work. Let's just say on my way back to Konoha during the 1-month training period, I ended up running into some foreign ninja where they shouldn't be. It was an evasive answer, but Shikamaru and Shino both understood the gist of what he was saying. Would this be the same month where you got those new eyes? Asked Shikamaru. Naruto chuckled. Sure, let's go with that. Anyways, you should be getting ready for your match Shino. You know Konkuro is a puppet user, but he also uses poisons. So be careful. I appreciate the advice, Shino said with a nod. Try not to kill, I'm hoping to convince Suna to side with us since Orochimaru killed their cage. But wait, said Shikamaru, if Orochimaru killed the cage then who? The lazy Nara's eyes widened and Naruto nodded. Yes, Orochimaru is the one currently sitting next to the Hokage. Not a pleasant thought. Anyways, I want you to be prepared to do your part. As Naruto began walking back into the fighter's booth, Shino began moving down to the arena, and Shikamaru followed the blonde demon shinobi, his mind a whirlwind of activity. When had Naruto gotten so serious? How had he gotten that information on Oto's and Suna's invasion? That wasn't like the old Naruto, nothing at all like the goofball he knew. This new Naruto was something else. Something troublesome. Proctor-san, I forfeit. Shikamaru looked at Konkuro when the Suna genin spoke. Why would he forfeit? Especially when he had been so keen on bragging about making Chunin during the prelims. Unless there really was an invasion about to happen. Which meant Shikamaru would need to keep on his toes. What are you still doing up here, Shika? Flashback end. Birth of the new Demon King. Shikamaru sighed. I have a feeling this exam is about to get a whole lot more troublesome. Naruto sighed as he watched Ino get pulverized by Temari, who fought her as Shikamaru had forfeit the match. The match hadn't lasted more than maybe 4 or 5 seconds at most. Nearly the moment Genma had begun the match, Ino had been blasted into a wall by Temari's Kameidachi no Jutsu. Not that all of it could be blamed on Ino, Temari had looked pretty steamed before the match began. No doubt she was upset about more or less losing to Shikamaru. After all, she may have technically won, but it was only due to the laziness on Shikamaru's part than any ability or skill on hers. Still, the fact that Ino had lost so quickly did not reflect well on her abilities, or those of her teacher. Honestly, I don't know what we're going to do with these girls. Sakura and Ino are so pathetic. It's like they never even took the time to really train themselves. That is what happens when one spends so much time staring at their crush and not training, Shino said, pushing his glasses up on his nose so that they flashed in the sunlight. I hear ya, Shino, Naruto said with a heavy sigh. Man, I wish our kunoichi were like Temari, strong and hot. Not little twig girls who believe dieting is the best way to lose weight. Honestly, it was something he didn't understand. Ino and Sakura, along with all the girls in his class, spent their time doing one of two things: staring at Sasuke, or dreaming of having said Uchiha's babies. They never trained, never put any effort into getting strong or being a good ninja, believing their knight in brooding armor would come and rescue them. He couldn't figure out how the girls in his class, especially when the ones that did pass were all said to be exceptionally bright, could ever think like that after having seen how Sasuke acted. Naruto liked putting fangirls into two categories. One type was at the very least useful, either because they went the only way that gave them any respect and trained like crazy to gain enough skill so that they could impress their crush. Or they had useful connections, which had their own benefits though not as much as those with skill. The other type, seemingly the one Ino and Sakura belonged to, were completely and utterly useless. They spent more time stalking their crush than they spent on their training, would spend their money on makeup hair care products instead of ninja supplies and weapons, gave their looks more attention than their muscles, used perfume instead of scent killers, and did the worst possible thing a ninja could do: diet. Any idiot knew that you lost weight from training, and that even gave the advantage of gaining muscles and strength. Honestly, the only real use those girls had as ninja were cannon fodder, and since there were laws that prevented them being used as such, they shouldn't even be allowed to graduate the academy. Maybe it was thanks to Kyuubi giving him this new perspective, or perhaps he had always had it, but Naruto could never comprehend why women liked to simulate interrogation by starvation. Like they thought not eating would actually help their figure. And once they started starving themselves, they would give anyone who was actually smart enough to exercise and was not afraid to eat a healthy meal in their presence hateful and malicious glares. Even a simply bandit with no knowledge on chakra could defeat, and it wasn't surprising that they were extremely popular amongst rapists since they had good looks, little bark and no bite. And no matter how many times you told them, how many points people made about how unhealthy and dangerous it was, they never changed, believing their knight in shining armor would come and rescue them. Having spent months with Sakura and having already been in several dangerous, life and death situations, Naruto knew it to be true as she still hadn't even made an attempt at getting stronger. It was the most frustrating thing in existence, and personally, Naruto couldn't wait to get off of Team 7 so he wouldn't have to deal with her crap. Will Uzumaki Naruto and Sabaku no Gaara please come down to the arena? Naruto smirked as he heard his name called. He looked over at Gaara and grinned. Are you ready, little Tanuki? He asked, getting 3 shocked looks from the Suna Genin. Well, Kankuro and Temari looked shocked. Gaara's face was mostly impassive, but the blonde saw a hint of apprehension. He chuckled. No doubt they were wondering how he knew of the redhead's host. He absently wondered if Shikaku knew he was the descendant of Raizen. And if so, had it told Gaara? Not that it mattered to Naruto whether or not Shukaku knew of his relation to the most powerful demon to have ever graced Makai. It wouldn't change the end results of this match. He jumped out of the fighter's booth, landing on the ground with a dull thud. He walked over to the middle of the arena, where Gaara appeared in a swirl of sand a few seconds later. Are both contestants ready? Asked Genma. He received no answer, but then he hadn't expected one from this battle. Gaara never really seemed to talk much anyway, and Naruto was being exceptionally quiet. Then Haji. A swirl of leaves picked up between the two soon-to-be combatants. Hatake Kakashi and Uchiha Sasuke appeared within its center. Sasuke had changed his look. Instead of the blue outfit, he was now clad in a black pair of pants and shirt, with white bandages along his arms. He had elbow pads on and black shinobi sandals. He and Kakashi stood back to back in what Naruto figured the pair felt was a cool opening pose. He snorted, maybe if they had been on time. I'm sorry, are we late? Asked Kakashi, rubbing the back of his head as he gave everyone an eye smile. As a matter of fact, Kakashi, you are so late in fact that Sasuke's match was over 2 hours ago. Because he couldn't show up on time he was disqualified, Genma said, much to the shock of Kakashi and the anger of Sasuke. What do you mean I'm disqualified? Asked Sasuke, flaring his Sharingan at the proctor as if it would somehow convince the man he should be allowed to fight. Meanwhile Kakashi was looking at Genma in shock, he had been positive that Sasuke would still be allowed to compete. After all, many of the people who came here had done so simply to see his prized student fight in this tournament. Genma rolled his eyes. If this kid thought he was going to bend to his will just because he brought out a pair of jutsu-thieving monkey marbles, then he had another thing coming. You had your chance to fight, and you blew it by showing up late. If we can't even expect you to show up on time for your own match, then you don't deserve to be Chunin anyways. Now step aside, I've got a match to run. It was then Kakashi and Sasuke saw the competitors. How dare you steal my match? Sasuke said, glaring at Naruto who just sighed at the raven-haired kid's anger. It wasn't his fault the Uchiha had decided not to show up on time. I stole nothing from you, the blonde replied. You lost your chance at competing by taking up your sensei's bad habits. Perhaps you should remember this and use it as a reminder of why it's important to be on time. Then again, you were probably too busy licking Kakashi's ass to even know what time it was. I'll teach you not to insult your betters, Dobi. Sasuke crouched down low and went through 3 hand seals. Lightning began sparking from his hands, right before the Uchiha disappeared in a blur of speed. Naruto raised an eyebrow at Sasuke's newfound speed. Not because he was fast but because it was all fake. The blonde easily recognized the Shunshin movement technique, which made a person speed up so quickly it seemed as if they had teleported. Naruto could easily follow Sasuke's movements, and the moment the Uchiha appeared at his side, Naruto was already in motion. He grabbed Sasuke's face, lifting the boy up before he even had time to react. Then he proceeded to slam the other genin head first into the ground. The earth cracked and cratered slightly under Sasuke's head. The lightning technique, which Naruto recognized as the Chidori, disappeared from Sasuke's hand and the boy's body went limp. Naruto took his hand of the genin's face to reveal the Sasuke's eyes were still open, though they were rolled up into the back of his head. Naruto picked up the Uchiha by the shirt and chucked him at Kakashi. Hatake, take your butt buddy and leave. This isn't over Naruto. Attacking a fellow genin is an act of treason, Kakashi warned, his eyes glaring at the blonde. In case you didn't see, Sasuke attacked me first, said Naruto with an incredulous snort. Of course, everyone knows of your blatant favoritism, and I'm not surprised you're showing it here as well. Now get the fuck off the arena floor before I smash your face into the ground as well. Kakashi narrowed his eyes, but left with an unconscious Sasuke over his shoulder. Now maybe we can get this thing started. Proctor-san, if you would. Right, the first match of the second round, Sabaku no Gaara vs. Uzumaki Naruto. Hajime. Birth of the new Demon King. Sasuke-kun. Everyone who was in the general vicinity of one Haruno Sakura winced as the ear-splitting, glass-breaking shriek came out of the pink-haired girl's mouth. It was the kind of sound that one would never expect from a human girl. Not even a banshee could make that kind of sound. Then again, maybe the girl wasn't completely human. Perhaps Sakura was some kind of human, banshee hybrid and it gave her unparalleled shrieking powers. It seemed like legit theory to the many people that were sitting even remotely near her. Said girl was by Kakashi's side instantly, grabbing Sasuke and attempting to wake him up. Of course attempting to wake up was a completely relative term. She was screaming out his name with worry, thankfully her volume was at least slightly turned down. However, the way she was touching him was definitely not something most people would do when trying to wake up someone. Well, unless they were attempting to wake them up by disturbing them so thoroughly that it forced them to wake up. Were the girl more attractive it might have even been a nice wake-up call. However, given the girl's shrieking, that overly large forehead, and the fact that she was flatter than a billboard made her seem almost like a man. Then again, maybe Sasuke was into that kind of thing. Many people knew the Uchiha had girls throwing themselves at him left, right and center, and yet he never did anything with them. He wouldn't even go out on a date. It made a few of the more observation and less clan-obsessive shinobi wonder. Perhaps Sasuke played for the other team. Having some trouble with your genin, Kakashi? Asked Asum with an amused grin once the ringing from his ears stopped. Perhaps this will teach you to follow your own motto. What was it again? Oh yes, something like, those who don't follow the rules are trash, but those who abandon their comrades are worse than trash. I believe it was something like that. Kakashi scowled. I didn't abandon anyone, I've been helping Sasuke this whole time. I think he was talking about your other 2 students, Kurenai said with a frown. Her respect for the copy ninja had been continuously decreasing ever since the preliminaries, where she had learned that he hadn't taught Sakura or Naruto anything. Of course, that had been because he was too busy training the Uchiha, which was another black mark as far as Kurenai was concerned. She didn't show favoritism to any of her genin, even though she was extremely close to Hinata. You do know that Sasuke was not your only student in this exam, and Sakura's battle with Ino was pathetic. Asuma winced since he knew Ino had done no better, especially after this latest match. Kurenai ignored Sakura's obnoxious protest on her performance as she glared at Kakashi. Her techniques and strategies were all academy-level work. I would have at least thought you might teach the girl a few genjutsu or something. I'm not very good at genjutsu, was Kakashi's excuse for not teaching Sakura. And there was no point in training Naruto, it's not like he would have won just because I was training him. And yet he did win, Asuma pointed out. He not only won, he beat Neji to a pulp. How much better would he have been if you had actually trained him from the beginning, rather than wasted all your time on Sasuke? I don't need you two giving me a lecture, Kakashi said, scowling behind his mask. No, what you need is an ass-kicking, Enko said from her spot. You neglected two of your students, showed favoritism to one, disregarded your own code, and are still trying to come up with excuses for your current lack of intelligent decisions. Now why don't you head somewhere else? I have no desire to sit near someone who would abandon his own students. She hated people who would abandon someone else just because they thought that person was worthless. It reminded her too much of Orochimaru for her taste. Kakashi looked at all of the others and noticed none of the looks he was receiving were friendly. Well, except for Sakura, who was more or less ignoring him in favor of molesting the still out cold Uchiha. Deciding that discretion was the better part of valor, and fearing that the females who knew him may do something too painful to him, like burn his Ika if he stayed, Kakashi left in a quick shunshin. Leaving his prized student who was still being tended to by a Sakura, who disgustingly enough was cooing to the Uchiha and doting on him like some kind of sycophant. Birth of the new Demon King. Naruto and Gaara stared at each other as Genma called the start to the match like they hadn't even heard him. This had been the battle Naruto had been waiting for. During his time in Makai he had fought many different kinds of demons, all of varying strength. However, he had never faced against a demon higher than a B class. Shukaku was an A- class demon lord, and while he did not have the raw power Naruto did, he had better knowledge of his own power than the blonde Uzumaki. That alone made this a worthwhile test for him. For a moment neither moved. Naruto was just content to see what the insane Sunagenin would make as his first move, and Gaara was just staring at the blonde. Mother is afraid of you, Uzumaki. Why is this? The redhead finally asked. There was a look of confusion on his face. It was almost funny to see how confused he was without hearing the voice of Shukaku in his head, though any humor the situation may have had was tempered by the fact that he didn't seem capable of making choices without Shukaku telling him what to do. Why won't mother talk to me? Naruto raised an eyebrow as he heard the name Gaara called Shukaku. He shrugged the amusing thought of Shukaku being a mother, especially when his mind conjured an image of said male demon wearing a pink apron and stiletto heels, and grinned. You're, ahem. Mother is afraid of me because it knows that I have the power to kill it. Now, if you're done playing 20 questions, why don't we get this party started? As Naruto began to walk towards the red-haired genin, having decided that if Gaara wasn't going to bring the fight to him, then he was going to bring the fight to Gaara. Said genin held his head and began shaking it back and forth. Mother doesn't like you. Mother recognizes that stench and mother doesn't like it. Well, isn't that just too bad? Naruto replied. Mother's going to have to get used to it because I'm going to be kicking your ass really soon. Just as the blonde took another step, Gaara began screaming. Mother wants your blood, Uzumaki. Mother will not be cowed by you. Mother refuses to be afraid of you. Sand burst from the gourd on the redhead's back, as Yuki began pouring out of Gaara like a sieve. Naruto watched in an odd fascination as the sand split into 4 different parts, which then split into 4 more, and then began to morph as soon as they touched the ground. The creatures that formed looked odd. They didn't possess any solid shape, and were constantly changing. Some had 4 arms, others had 2, some had what looked like swords for arms, or axes, maces. They were constantly changing and shifting. The only thing all 4 had in common was the single eye on top of the small lump that more or less acted as the head. Naruto looked at the 16 creatures that were converging on him with a large grin. So this is how you want to start things off, Well, that's fine with me. I could use a little exercise before we get to the main event. Let's rock. The sand creatures came at him all at once, converging on his location like the blonde was a lit beacon. And with that hair, maybe he was. Naruto burst towards the first one in a blur of motion, coming in hot and driving a knife-edged hand right through the creature's eye. It let out a loud shriek, the kind that sounded like it was coming from a dying beast. Naruto was just thankful this creature's shrieking wasn't anywhere near as bad as Sakura. Then it burst into sand particles and converged on the other 15 sand monsters left. Acting with the speed of a veteran fighter, Naruto flew forward towards his next target. The creature swung its left hand, which was currently in an axe form, but was too slow as the blonde moved under the attack. One of Naruto's hands came up, slicing off the weaponized hand before his foot lashed out in a high kick that caught the creature in the face. He would have finished it off, but by now two of the sand beasts were upon him. Naruto ducked under a sword swing that was meant to decapitate him, jumped back from a kick from what looked like a hammer foot, then jumped to the left in time to miss the mace bearing down on his position. The mace weapon hit the ground with earth-shattering force, and Naruto decided to lash out with his own attack. He channeled Yuki into his foot, deciding that since he was facing a demon, or a boy possessed by a demon, turnabout would be fair play. His foot began to take on a red hue as it lit up like a fire. Blazing red energy poured off the foot as smashed it into the mace. The mace blew up in an explosion of sand, along with the rest of the creature who could not withstand the Yuki Naruto had unleashed. A smirk came to Naruto's face as he set his target on another creature. Birth of the new Demon King. Hinata cried out in pain as she shut off her Byakugan as soon as Naruto began pouring on the power. Hinata-chan. What's wrong, Hinata-chan? Cried Kiba as Hinata rubbed her eyes furiously. It's Naruto-kun see chakra, stammered Hinata. That attack. It's so powerful. Looking at it with my Byakugan is like staring directly into the sun. It's so powerful it hurts just looking at it. No, that is not chakra, Hazashi thought to himself as he heard his eldest daughter's words from where he was sitting. That is something else entirely, but it does not belong to the Kyuubi. What is that power? Birth of the new Demon King. Naruto thrust his palm into a sand creature's face, unloading a powerful blast of Yuki that annihilated the entire beast's head. The body soon followed, bursting into sand and coalescing around the other creatures. A frown marred Naruto's face as he looked at the remaining creatures. He had destroyed 7 so far, there were only 9 left. However, those 9 were significantly larger than when he had started. The sand from the other monsters I beat are being added to the remaining sand creatures. That meant the more he killed the larger the creatures would get. Maybe I should just destroy them all in a single shot. Deciding his previous plan was the best, Naruto jumped high into the air. He formed a gun shape with his left hand, with both index and pointer fingers sticking out, and held onto it with his right. Red and black Yuki began to form above the tip of his fingers in the shape of a ball. Akumo number Taiho, Demon Gun. The ball deconstructed as Naruto pushed his Yuki out, exploding and turning into a large 15-foot wide cylinder of energy that shot towards the ground at insane speeds. It exploded in the midst of the sand monsters, decimating them all with a single blow. When all was said and done, all that was left to let people know the sand creatures existed was the large crater in the ground. Landing on the ground, Naruto looked at Gaara and grinned. That was a nice warm-up. But I think it's now time we got down to the main event, don't you? Birth of the new Demon King. What was? Shouted Ino as she stared at the crater in the ground, her eyes so wide it looked like her eyeballs would fall out of her orbital sockets. Did you guys see that? He just blew up all of those things in a single attack. What kind of attack was that? I don't know, said a stumped Asuma. I've never seen anything like that, and that chakra. It was even worse than what I remember feeling from the Kyuubi, Kurenai said, staring at the destruction Naruto's attack had lain waste to. She shivered. Kurenai may have been young when the Kyuubi attacked, being 13 years old and just a chunin at the time. But she could still remember the bloodlust and power that had rolled off of the Kyuubi in waves. But the Kyuubi felt like an infant compared to the power behind Naruto's attack. Everyone heard her words, but no one said anything. Whether what Kurenai said was true or not, no one could deny that whatever the blonde Uzumaki had done was a powerful attack. Many of the civilians that had hated Naruto for being the Jinchuriki for the Kyuubi, were now feeling fearful that it had come to take its revenge on them for their treatment of it. Birth of the new Demon King. What kind of jutsu was that, Hokage-sama? Asked the still disguised Orochimaru. On the inside the hubby Sennin was cackling in glee. What power? What strength? I was a fool not to give him my gift in the forest, but it matters not. Soon, Naruto-kun, you will be mine. I couldn't tell you. Kazekage-sama, Sarutobi replied evenly, even though he was shocked at the attack Naruto had done. The attack greatly reminded him of the few times he had seen a Bijudama-tailed beast ball only on a slightly smaller scale. What's more, the blonde had not used the Kyuubi's chakra, however he had not used his own either. Whatever power he had used was far more powerful than even the Kyuubi. Which should not be possible, since the Kyuubi was the strongest Biju in existence. Well, whatever that was, it was very powerful. Agreed. Birth of the new Demon King. You are powerful, so very powerful. Looking into Gaara's eyes, Naruto realized that the boy was no longer in control. The sclera of Gaara's eyes had become black, containing yellow irides with pupils that each takes the shape of a black 4-pointed star with 4 black dots around it. They were the eyes of Shukaku, and it was obvious the boy was possessed. What power! What incredible power! Your power will be mine. Sand swelled around Gaara, covering his body. Black markings began to spread out along the sand. It wasn't long before Gaara became a miniature version of Shukaku, with large, claw-like hands, stubby feet and a large raccoon tail swishing behind him. Well, aren't you just the ugliest thing I've ever seen, Naruto said with a laugh. That's a face only a mother could love. Shut up you. The Shukaku's voice came out, a loud whining sound that was almost as bad as Sakura. Naruto frowned. Kyuubi had told him Shukaku had a grisly voice. I'll steal all your power. You can try, you overstuffed bag of sand, Naruto taunted. He held out his hand and beckoned the possessed genin forward. Come. Raaaaah. Shukaku threw himself forward rather fast for a guy on two stubby little legs. He swiped a claw at Naruto, which extended in its attempt to hit the blonde. However, the demon shinobi just grinned as he charged Yuki into his fist, meeting the claw in an explosion of power. Shukaku's entire arm was blown up and the creature reared its back to scream in pain. Ah, damn you, I'll kill you. It began attacking again, with all it had, claw swipes, wind attacks, sand attacks, nothing it threw at the blonde Uzumaki worked. Naruto wove around the claw swipes, occasionally using a knife-edged hand to cut off the claw's fingers. He used his Yuki attacks to neutralize the wind attacks, and whenever the sand tried to crush him, Naruto would release his Yuki and blast the sand away like it was nothing more than a minor irritant. Naruto ducked under another claw swipe. His hand shot up, covered in an intense red and black energy that took on the shape of a blade. With movement quicker than the Kuroi Senku himself, Naruto sliced off the entire clawed arm like it was paper. Shukaku reared back as if struck, roaring out in both pain and frustration. The demon lord attacked again, fighting with that much more zeal as it did everything in its power to kill the blonde who was more or less mocking its inability to kill him. The Shukaku seemed to be getting frustrated that it had yet to even land a hit on the genin, who had already destroyed his arms at least 10 times. With a loud roar, Shukaku let loose his Yuki, a muddy brown color that saturated Gaara's body. A giant tower of sand exploded upwards, engulfing the entire arena in smoke. As quickly as it had come, the smoke was blown away by a powerful gust of wind. Many of the spectators reeled back in shock and horror at the sight that greeted them. In the center of the arena, standing at least a good 30 meters in height, stood the terror of Tsunagaku, the Ikibi no Shukaku. Birth of the new demon king. Oh, this is so not good, Asuma said with a groan. Releasing his Biju here. Is he insane? Asked Kurenai with a shout. We need to do something before Naruto gets killed. Now hold up, Nai-chan, said Enko before Kurenai whirled on her. Hold up. Naruto is not facing off against some insane ninja. He's fighting a Biju. There is no way a genin, no matter how good, can fight that thing. And you can? Asked Enko, looking at her with an incredulous look. None of us have the power to fight a Biju. Besides, look down at the Gaki, he's completely calm. Kurenai frowned but did as told. Enko was right, Naruto did look rather calm. To be honest, if he was showing any emotion at all, Kurenai had to say it was excitement. There was a large grin on his face as he eyed the giant demon. It looked like he was enjoying the battle more than anything else. I still don't like it, Kurenai said. You don't have to like it, Enko returned. Hell, I don't like it, but there is nothing we can do. Fighting a Biju would crush us. Besides, we've seen what the kid can do. If anyone can defeat that thing, it's him. Birth of the new demon king. Well, this is more like it. I was beginning to get bored of fighting the mini-you, Naruto commented lightly. His eyes took on a red glow, which when combined with his Rinnegan made for a freaky affect. It's time for me to really let loose. You think you've won? I'll kill you. Fuuton. Renkuudan, wind release, wind bullet. As the giant bullet of wind sped towards Naruto, said blonde unleashed a large ball of Yuki, which he launched at the mass of displaced and compressed air. The two attacks struck, and Naruto's proved to be the stronger by a large margin. It struck the demon in the face, and Naruto decided he was lucky Gaara was no located near its head, since the red head would have been destroyed along with that particular appendage after the blast had struck. Naruto ran towards the giant demon lord, which began sending out sand tendrils to crush him once it regained its head. However, with Naruto having decided to use Yuki for this battle, he was able to use Shundo to great effect in dodging the sand that came his way. Get off! Get off! Shukaku shouted as Naruto appeared on the demon lord's head after one of his Shundos. Shukaku tried to wrap its sand around his ankles, but Naruto used his Yuki to keep himself from getting stuck. Grinning, Naruto placed his hands on the massive demon's head. They began to grow a dark red, and were soon crackling with power as Naruto channeled more and more Yuki into his hands. He soon released it in a powerful burst, and the effects were rather astonishing. Naruto's Yuki was not only very poisonous, but also had a similar effect to heating. Most of the reason his Yuki blasts disintegrated his opponents when used, was quite simply because his attacks usually ran upwards of 1000 degrees Fahrenheit. That meant anything his Yuki attacks hit, were more or less vaporized. It was a little different with Shukaku. Since the entire creature was made from Yuki-infused sand, the demon lord was much sturdier than most. This meant that its body did not dissolve when struck with a point-blank blast of Naruto's Yuki. Instead, Shukaku was turned into a large shard of glass. Ah, what art! Naruto sniffed as he looked down at his creation. Truly I should have gone into glass making. Sometimes I astound myself. I shall call it, Demon Lord Allah Sand. Too bad I can't let this thing just stand here. Oh well. He tapped his foot on the now glassed Biju's head. Cracks started appearing around the spot Naruto tapped, spreading out in an ever-increasing web until the entire demon's body was filled with tiny cracks. Giving one more tap, the demon lord's form shattered. Birth of the new demon king. I don't believe it, Kankuro choked out as he stared at the glass shards that fell to the ground. He beat Gaara. Gaara. Temari cried out in worry. Ignoring her other brother's cry of, wait, she opened her fan and flew down to the arena floor. There she found Gaara, alive but unconscious. Her youngest brother was sitting on the floor, eyes rolled in the back of his head. And the blonde who had defeated him like he had been fighting Biju all his life had a hand on his head. What are you doing to him? Cried Temari. Let him go. He's already defeated. She would have just attacked him but Naruto had Gaara hostage. Relax, said Naruto in a calm voice, his eyes closed. I'm not going to hurt Gaara, but I need to see what is wrong with Shukaku. His words caused Temari to stop short. She tilted her head and a look of confusion crossed her face. What do you mean? A smile appeared on Naruto's face. Nothing. Don't worry your pretty little head over a thing. Now, let's see what's behind that cage. Temari heard the boy's last mutterings and wondered what he meant. What cage? Could it be possible that Naruto was inside of Gaara's seal? But how? Was it the Rinnegan? Temari could only stand there and watch, hoping and praying that her brother would be okay. Birth of the new demon king. Man, this place is even more of a dump than my own mind. Naruto said with a grumble as he looked around the redhead's mind. The entire place looked like a desert, everywhere he looked was sand, sand and more sand. Well, maybe it was a little better than the sewers his had been. Not that Naruto could access it anymore, since he no longer had a seal he couldn't actually enter his mind anymore. Oh well, there was nothing useful there for him anyways as far as he was concerned. Looking around, Naruto decided on a destination to head to. A place where he saw a giant cavern in a large wall. Naruto disappeared in a blur of speed and made it to the cage in record time. The cage was a lot like his, with large steel gray bars, and a seal in the center. However, he noticed that the seal was frayed and worn. It looked like someone had taken a fire jutsu to it. Inside of the cave was Shukaku. And yet, it wasn't. There was something that he couldn't see, yet he could feel. It was like Shukaku held two souls, which was impossible. And yet, that was what he was feeling from the demon lord. And it seemed the beast had learned of his presence, for it whirled around and glared at him. It's you. What are you doing here? Though it spoke brashly, Naruto heard the worry in its voice. Not surprising, it probably realized just how helpless it was. He ignored it for the moment as he tried to decide what to do. You. Naruto turned and saw Gaara standing just a little behind him. The boy looked frightened. What are you doing here? How did I get here? What's going on? Naruto had to blink at the rapid-fire questions the boy was asking. He was rather surprised the boy was being so emotional. Then again, it's not every day the demon you're carrying inside of you gets beat in 5 minutes flat by a genin. Oh, I'm just here to see what's wrong with Shukaku, Naruto said lightly. Gaara stopped and blinked at him. What? Shukaku. Something's wrong with him, Naruto repeated. I doubt you can feel it, but I can sense two souls coming from Shukaku. Two souls. Gaara muttered. Could it be? I had been told that the Shukaku was an insane priest who was sealed into a tea kettle. A priest. Naruto looked thoughtful for a moment. Yes, a priest could merge with a demon if done right. Though they and the demon they merged with would lose their minds. It is a very foolish thing to do, especially attempting to merge with a demon lord. The blonde sighed. Very well, it looks like that priest is going to have to go. What are you doing? Asked Gaara, who by now seemed to realize Naruto wasn't going to hurt him. Though he was curious as to why. I'm going to get rid of that priest, what else? Asked Naruto in a rhetorical fashion. Anyone stupid enough to try and merge with a demon is dangerous. Besides, that priest is the entire reason Shukaku is so insane. Once the priest is gone, Shukaku should become normal again, and you should be able to sleep. Gaara's eyes widened. Really? Really? Naruto walked up to the cage and glared at the giant sand demon. I'll kill you. It screeched at him. Naruto ignored its cries as he rushed through the cage. What are you? No. No. Stop this. I will not die. You can't. You can't. I can, and I will. Naruto shouted as his hand was plunged into Shukaku's head. With an upward yank, Naruto pulled out a ghastly, pale white soul. It wiggled and squirmed as if trying to break free. Shukaku quieted and began to sink down, as layers and layers of sand dissolved from its body. Naruto jumped back out of the cage and held the soul. Disgusting, he muttered before cocking his yuki-covered fist and plowing it into the soul. There was a piercing wail that emanated from the soul as it was destroyed. When the apparition was gone, the clearing was silent. There, Naruto said in a pleased voice. He was rather proud of himself. Naruto had only been getting the basics of his Rinnegan down, and only knew that he could theoretically drag a soul out of a body. He had never actually tried it before, but that he was capable of doing so on his first try made his feel very good about himself. He turned to the stunned-looking Gaara. The real Shukaku should be waking up in about an hour. When he does, I suggest you two talk. If he starts being stubborn, tell him that Raizen's descendant will beat his ass for not working with you. Okay. Gaara said, not like he could have said anything else. He was still trying to understand what the hell just happened. All right then. It looks like my work here is done. Laters. Birth of the new Demon King. Naruto came back to the real world. Time inside of a seal was notoriously slow, so not much more than a second had elapsed outside of the seal. He looked at Temari and smiled. Gaara's going to be fine, he said. He set the redhead on the ground and stepped back, allowing Temari to rush to her brother's side. Just make sure he gets a lot of uninterrupted rest. From what I understand, he has 12 years of making up to do. Temari looked at the blonde who had just defeated Gaara's demon. Not just beaten it, but did so easily. He could have killed Gaara, but he hadn't, and whatever the blonde had done, Temari was sure it had been beneficial. Thank you, she said with a watery smile. You're welcome. Now, Naruto's eyes narrowed as he looked up at the cage booth. I want you to tell all of your forces that Orochimaru has killed and is impersonating your cage. Tell them they are not to attack with Oto, and any that do will be killed. Understand? Temari's eyes widened, not just at the fact that he knew about the invasion, but what he said about her father as well. What? Orochimaru has killed and impersonated your cage. That man you see up there is not your father. Tell all your invading forces to either back off or help us drive off Oto. Do you understand? Asked Naruto in a growl. Why yes, Temari stuttered. Good, then get to it. And with that Naruto disappeared. He reappeared right next to the disguised Orochimaru, whose eyes widened as the blonde threw his fist out. There was a large explosion that destroyed the seat that the hubby Sanin was sitting on, and the entire wall behind it. However, Orochimaru had managed to escape, using his quick reflexes to jump out of the way. Orochimaru! Naruto roared as he came at the disguised Sanin again. Today's the day you die. I just hope you give me a better fight than these wet behind the ear genin. How did he find out who I was? Orochimaru was forced to shed his disguise as Naruto's Yuki-enhanced fist blew another hole where he had been just seconds before. The two of them landed on a roof not far from the stadium. The entire area was now pandemonium. Birth of the new Demon King. As the shock of their leader's discovery wore off, the Oto ninja that had disguised themselves as civilians began attack anyone they could. However, they soon found out that without the genjutsu that Kabuto had been going to cast in effect, they were outmanned and outmatched. Maida Guy, who had arrived a little while ago with his student Rock Lee, was a whirlwind force of destruction. He had already shed his weights, determining that in a battle for the safety of his village, he could not afford to hold back. He used his fists and feet to pound any ninja that was close to him into the ground, or the air, or through a wall. Every hit he sent broke bones and liquefied insides. Asuma had his trench knives out. They were covered in green wind chakra, and he was using them to their greatest potential as he sliced through Oto ninja in his way. While he may not have Guy's enthusiasm when it came to fighting, he was more than able of handling the ninja that were in his path. Right by his side, Kurenai was using her genjutsu to confuse any opponent that Asuma did not get right off the bat. She would use her skills in stealth to sneak up behind them and slit their throat, or kill them with a well-thrown kunai. Mostly, she worked defensively, allowing the more battle-oriented Asuma to take charge. And just a little ways away from her was none other than Anko. Currently, said woman was cackling in glee as she launched several snakes at any enemies that got close. The snakes clamped down on the Oto ninja, not only eliciting screams of pain, but slowly killing them from the snake venom her summons carried. While she killed her enemies, Anko was releasing a string of taunts and insults at all those who were still alive, enraging them further and making them that much easier to kill. All around the stadium similar battles were taking place. Azumo and Katetsu were using teamwork to defeat anybody that came to close. Genma was attacking several Oto ninja that appeared on the arena floor. Huddled together were the Konoha 12, those who had not sent to the infirmary. Shikimaru was using his Kujimane no Jutsu to hold enemies in place, while Tenten bombarded them with kunai. Shino had his bug sucking the chakra of any enemy ninja that got too close, while Hinata and Kiba were using their respective taijutsu styles to deal as much damage as they could. Even Ino was doing what she could, using her Shintention no Jutsu to take over people's mind and have them kill their teammates. The only people who weren't fighting were Sakura, who was huddled in her seat in fear, praying for her Sasuke-kun to save her. And Lee, who was unfortunately too injured to fight and had to rely on Tenten for protection. A little ways from them was none other than Uchiha Sasuke. Said genin was currently slaughtering Odo ninja left and right, an insane grin on his face as he reveled in his skills and the power he had over these weak opponents. Birth of the new Demon King. Baki. Tamari shouted as she neared her sensei, who was fighting with Genma. Baki. The Kazekage has been killed. That man is really Orochimaru in disguise. What? He hadn't been close enough to hear what had been said by the blonde, and only saw him attack their cage. Orochimaru killed our cage and disguised himself to get into the Chunin exams. Tamari shouted. We've been used. Shit. Baki did not doubt Tamari's words. She would never lie about something so important, she rarely ever lied period. Which meant she was right and this battle was meaningless. Looks like our battle has ended, he told Genma as he leapt back. I'm going to recall our forces and help you drive out Odo. How can we trust you? Asked Genma. You did just attack us, and from the looks of things you guys have been planning this for a while now. It was our Kazecage's orders, Baki said. However, it seems our Kazekage was wrong to trust that snake. If he is dead, then fighting you would be pointless. Quote. Very well, Genma said. Inform your men of what's happened and change your allegiance, I'll let those on my side know as well. Thank you, Baki nodded to the Konoha before turning around. Come on Tamari, let's find Kankuro. Hi. Birth of the new Demon King. Kukuku. Well done Naruto-kun, Orochimaru chortled. Tell me, how did you know who I was? Naruto cocked his head to the side and tapped his fingers to his temple. Not much can get past these eyes, Orochimaru. Surely, you know the stories of the Rinnegan. Of course, and such delectable stories they are. Naruto felt a shiver of disgust run up his spine as Orochimaru licked his lips and eyed him like a piece of meat. If even half the myths on those eyes are true, then they would be very powerful. You won't be laying a finger on these eyes, Orochimaru, Naruto said. Today is the day your life ends. Kukuku, you're welcome to try Naruto-kun, Orochimaru said. I wanted to test your potential anyways. Both fighters slid into their respective stances as they prepared for battle. Around them a purple barrier sprang up as four people in white robes with a purple bow holding them closed appeared en roof. Naruto took in the double barrier, noting that it was both designed to keep people in as well as out. Picking up a rock Naruto threw it and watched as the barrier sizzled and the rock disintegrated. You like? Asked Orochimaru with a grin on his face. It's a rather genius Kekai ninjutsu, barrier ninjutsu, that I created. It's called Shinshienjin, 4 Violet Flames Battle Encampment. The barrier does not allow anyone to enter or exit so long as the ninja are unharmed. The body of anyone touching it will immediately be engulfed in flames. In addition, there is no way to destroy the formation from inside the barrier, since the 4 people also have a barrier on the inside protecting them. So breaking out is extremely difficult, if not impossible. I had originally designed it so I could kill Sarutobi-sensei without any interference. However, I think I would much rather test your potential. The old man's death can wait for another day. Naruto smiled. You say that like you actually have a chance of surviving this encounter, Orochimaru. I assure you, this will be the last stand you make. Kukuku. Then why don't we begin? Suggested Orochimaru. A grin formed on Naruto's face, one that threatened to split his face in half. Very well. Naruto blurred from view as the battle began. Birth of the new Demon King. Naruto-kun. Sarutobi shouted as he jumped in front of the barrier. The Anbu team he had gotten together all stopped with him, all except one who ended up running straight into the purple barrier. The man was killed near instantaneously, his smoking and burnt corpse fell to the ground with a meaty thud. I don't think there's any way to get in this barrier, the Anbu captain said pensively as his commanding officer watched the battle going on inside anxiously. A grin formed on Naruto's face, one that threatened to split his face in half. Very well. Naruto blurred from view as the battle began. He reappeared right next to Orochimaru, his fist already lashing out in a punch that had so much strength put into it, it would take the Sannin's head off. Orochimaru had just enough time to weave his body around the punch, twisting his body at an angle that should be impossible for humans to accomplish. It was like he could dislocate all his joints at will, or like he didn't actually have a backbone. He moved much like a snake would. Considering his summons, the man's way of movement was fitting. The hubby Sannin lashed out as he dodged the first attack, striking at Naruto with a knife-edged hand aimed at his throat. Because of Naruto's strength even when he was not using his Yuki, the attack wouldn't have done much more than cause him to stumble. However, he still had no intention of getting hit by Orochimaru, and so he dodged accordingly, ducking under the blow and coming up with an uppercut. Orochimaru wove around the blow and made an attempt at stabbing Naruto through the eye. It was dodged when the blonde Uzumaki moved his head to the side, letting the hand ruffle his hair. In return, the blonde launched his own punch at the Sanin's face, however that was dodged. Naruto's knee came up and blocked Orochimaru's foot when it tried to take him by surprise. With no true blows landed, the two jumped back and reassessed each other. The entire sequence of combat had taken less than a minute. In the shinobi world, battles were usually fast-paced, where seconds could mean the difference between life and death. So many ninja were used to moving fast in combat. However, even then what the Anbu watching outside witnessed was beyond a simple ninja battle. The speed of the two fighters was of the kind very few could reach, it went beyond Jonin and into the realm of cages. What surprised them the most was that the one battling Orochimaru, S-rank ninja and one of the three Sannin who were said to be on par with any cage, was none other than Uzumaki Naruto, genin of Konoha, dead last of his class, and from his file an all-around screw-up. The image they had in their mind and the image the grinning blonde before them were in such complete contrast with each other that those watching found it hard to believe the battle could be anything more than a very elaborate genjutsu. A few of the younger officers there even tried to dispel an illusion just to make sure they hadn't been caught in one. "Oh man, did you see that?" asked Usagi as he watched the battle. "I could hardly even keep up with them." "Me either. The battle's only just started and it looks like they've kick-started into high gear." This particular comment came from Tori. "I expected this kind of fighting from someone like Orochimaru. But to see Uzumaki fighting like that is unbelievable," Usagi said in an excited voice. "It is most impressive," replied Tenzo, the captain of the Anbu squad. "But then, this is the genin who pranks the Anbu and clans of Konoha as a pastime. There is obviously more to this young man than we thought. Maybe we should offer him a position in the Anbu when this is all over," Usagi suggested. "You mean if he survives," said Tori. However, none were more surprised than Sarutobi Hiruzen. While the battle had just started, the fact that Naruto was more than keeping up with his former student was remarkable. Naruto, who was still just a genin, and one who was supposed to be at the bottom of his class's graduates, was fighting a shinobi that had been hailed as a genius. Even with the recent and mysterious changes the blonde went through, he should not have become this powerful. "What happened to you during that time in the Forest of Death, Naruto-kun?" Inside of the barrier, Naruto was grinning like a madman as he dodged and blocked, attacked and counter-attacked. He had never actually had this much fun. This was a fight. This was what he had been waiting for. A battle with a worthy opponent. It didn't matter that Naruto had decided not to use his Yuki so as to make the battle more even in the hopes of gaining a challenge. All that mattered to him was that he had found someone to battle who was on par with him as far as raw skills went. It actually went without saying that Orochimaru was a better fighter. His style was more fluid than Naruto's brawling style, his reflexes were better honed due to the decades of battle he had been in, and he had more tricks up his sleeve than the blonde did. But that was okay with Naruto, it just made this fight more exciting. What Naruto lacked in finesse and experience, he more than made up for in raw potential and physical ability. He may not be using Yuki in this battle, but his natural strength and speed were enough to keep up with the Sanin's cunning mind and deceptive tactics. He may not have experience, but Naruto had always been a genius in battle. Not in the way Hyuga Neji was, with his powerful taijutsu, or Shikamaru with his, thinking 200 moves ahead, strategy. No, what Naruto had was an innovative and creative mind that bordered on the insane. He thought outside the box, he was unpredictable, and to any shinobi who fought more with their mind than their bodies, that was a very frightening thing. "Quickly, let us see if we can't get this barrier down." Hearing the voice, Naruto looked out of the corner of his eye. He saw the Hokage and the Anbu on one side of the barrier. He frowned, turning his eyes back to his opponent. "Oi, Oja-san, what are you still doing there standing around like a lemon?" When he was sure he got the Hokage's attention, Naruto continued. "There's a war going on, you know. Why don't you go and help out your ninja?" "What? Naruto, this is not some genin you're fighting," Sarutobi said in an urgent voice. "This is Orochimaru, one of my students. He is one of the greatest traders of the leaf and an S-rank ninja. Even with your new power, you don't stand a chance against him." "Kukuku, you should listen to the old man, Naruto-kun," Orochimaru said with a chortle. "Not that it matters seeing as you're trapped here with me. That barrier won't come down unless I command the sound for to let it down, and that won't be happening for a while yet." Naruto rolled his eyes. "I'm hurt that you would think I'm not up to the task of killing some two-bit has-been." While Naruto could not see it, he could tell from the stiffening postures of the Anbu that they were all wide-eyed. The fact that Sarutobi looked like he had just shit a brick, and Orochimaru began seething was just a bonus. "I guarantee I'm stronger than you think. Than anything of you can think. Besides, you can't get past that barrier. All you'd be doing is standing there wasting time, when you could be helping turn the tides of battle. So let me have my fun and get going." Sarutobi hesitated. He didn't really want to leave, but Naruto was right. He had been trying to come up with a way to get through the barrier, however he could not think of anything that would work. It was impervious to ninjutsu, and he didn't have enough experience in Fuinjutsu to think of anything that might get rid of the seal. He didn't even think Jiraiya had that kind of talent. Minato might have. Sarutobi was sure he would have been able to find a way to get rid of the barrier. But he was no longer amongst the living, and thus no help. So he had a choice. He could stay here and watch helplessly as his grandson figure fought a man Sarutobi knew was far beyond his power. Or he could leave and enter the battle proper, helping as many shinobi as he could. In the end, the choice was obvious. I'm sorry Naruto, Sarutobi said, before turning to his Anbu. You three will stay here and watch the battle. If the barrier goes down you are to assist Uzumaki-san in fighting Orochimaru. He received 3 highs from his shinobi. Looking at Naruto one last time, Sarutobi left to fight in the battles going on down below. Maybe now I can fight win peace, Naruto said. He looked at Orochimaru and smirked. Ready to continue. Orochimaru chuckled. This kid was just full of surprises. Kukuku. Of course Naruto-kun, show me what you're made of. Naruto shivered. That just sounded so wrong, on so many levels. Birth of the new Demon King. The battle within the arena had taken a turn for the worst, against Oto that is. Armed with Naruto's information, Temari and Baki had informed the rest of their ninja the truth about the man that had been sitting in their cage's place. Enraged, Suna Ninja turned on Oto and the battle that had already been going poorly thanks to the battle plan they had laid out being disrupted by a certain blonde genin became that much worse. Kamedachi number jutsu. Temari swung her oversized fan and sent a force gale of cutting wind pockets towards a group of Oto ninja. While the jutsu was only C-ranked in power, it was strong enough that many of those caught in its grasp would not be fighting anytime soon. Just a little ways away from the sandy blonde, the second oldest of her siblings was using his puppets to either attack or herd Oto ninja into her attacks. Kankuro himself hid behind Baki for protection, as her brother wasn't any good at open combat, preferring to rely on his poisons and puppets to get the job done. She looked at the wall behind her, specifically at the still sleeping form of her youngest brother. It was so odd seeing him sleeping and not having Shukaku take over his body. She would have wondered what was happening to him, but considering the situation she was in, she knew that now was not the time for such trivial thoughts. He was safe, and that was all that mattered. Temari looked at several ninja her brother was herding over to her and swung her fan again. Kamedachi number jutsu. Birth of the new Demon King. Kabuto grimaced as he was sent flying backwards from another powerful blow to the chest by one Maida guy. He was just thankful that with his ability to heal himself he was practically impervious to any and all forms of damage. Otherwise this battle would have been over long ago, and it would not have been he who was the victor. Though just because he couldn't be permanently damaged didn't mean he wasn't going to curse his situation. Thanks to Kakashi as his damnable Sharingan he had been found before he could leave. Now he was not only fighting Maida guy, but also Hatake Kakashi and Midorishi Anko. Needless to say he was having a difficult time just trying to survive. Flipping himself around, Kabuto managed to land on his feet after getting smacked around by Guy. However, as soon as he stopped skidding backwards, Anko shot several snakes from her hands and wrapped them around his body. Even worse for the young medic nin and spy, his arms had been caught by the snakes as well, so he wouldn't be able to use any hand signs. A chirping sound caught his attention and Kabuto was just in time to see a flash of blue lightning from Kakashi's hand as the Chidori was plunged into his chest. There was a puff of smoke and Kabuto's body was soon replaced by a log. The traitorous medical ninja appeared just a little ways away. He gave no witty comeback like he usually might as he tried to escape from the trio of ninja. While he was arrogant, he was also smart. Kabuto knew that this battle was beyond him. Fighting 3 Jonin level ninja, 2 being a solid A rank and 1 being a mid to high B rank, was beyond anyone aside from those that earned the distinction of S rank. However, he was unable to escape as Maida guy had been standing in the back to ensure Kabuto didn't try to do what he was doing right now. The taijutsu specialist was on Kabuto before he knew what hit him. Kabuto winced as he received several hits from Guy. The problem with fighting the taijutsu specialist was that he was just too strong and fast for Kabuto to do anything more than redirect the blows to lessen the damage. Perhaps in a straight-up fight, Kabuto would be able to use trickery and his medial skills, but with 2 other ninja to deal with he had no chance of being capable of doing that. Kabuto ducked and dodged and weaved through the hailstorm of fists and feet that Guy threw at him. A few of the larger man's attacks came close, but none gave the medical ninja more than a grazing wound. The medical ninja's taijutsu style revolved around dodging opponents by predicting their next attack through muscle movement. Because of that, in spite of Guy being better than Kabuto at taijutsu, the white-haired medical ninja was able to keep just a few steps ahead of the taijutsu specialist. However, Konoha ninja often worked as a team, and this battle was no different. He became distracted when Anko launched a dozen snakes at him, and Kabuto ended up receiving another painful blow to the chest. He could feel his rib cage snapping and it took a bit of effort not to scream out in pain. He soared through the air and as he went under Kakashi, the copy ninja began going through several hand seals. Kaden. Gokakyu no Jutsu, Fire Release. Great Fireball Jutsu. Kakashi breathed out a large fireball that hit Kabuto, who was burnt to a crisp, his body hitting the ground with a meaty thud. However, before anyone could celebrate, the traitorous ninja once again disappeared in a puff of smoke. I can't see him anywhere, Guy said with a frown. He looked at his two partners, though recent circumstance left him somewhat reluctant to consider his former rival a partner. Can either of you see him? No, Kakashi said with a sigh as he looked around with his Sharingan. I can't see Kabuto anywhere. It's like he was never here. Damn. Anko pounded a fist into her right hand. I can't believe that bastard managed to get away. He's definitely a slippery one, Maida Guy said seriously, which was rare for Guy. But come, let us not waste time lamenting over this. There is still a lot more we must do to drive these most unyouthful invaders out of our home. Anko sighed. Right, let's go. The three Konoha ninja took off to help everyone else with their battles. None of them saw the figure sinking into the ground. Birth of the new Demon King. Shinraken, heavenly subjugation of the omnipresent fist. Naruto punched out at Orochimaru, who moved his body to dodge the blow. However, despite being well out of the way of the blonde's fist, the hubby Sannin was still sent sailing backwards with the same amount of force he would have been if he had been hit. Gah, that was like one of Tsunade's punches. Orochimaru gasped as he felt the pain in his body. It felt like someone had compressed the Hokage monument into a small size but left its mass intact and dropped it on his stomach. How did he even hit me? I know I dodged that. Is this another ability of the Rinnegan? Bansho Tenon, heavenly attraction of all creation. Gah, Orochimaru felt as if he had been hooked in the gut as he was pulled forward with enough force that he ended up flying through the air at Jonin-level speeds. When he got within his opponent's reach, Naruto pounded him right in the face with his fist. Shinraken. Once more Orochimaru flew through the air, right before he ended up plowing into the ground. Groaning, he stood back up and looked at his opponent, who seemed to be giving him time to recuperate. That was a very powerful attack, Naruto-kun, Orochimaru said. It reminded me of my teammate Tsunade's punches. Tell me, is this another ability of your Rinnegan? Could you stop calling me Naruto-kun? Asked Naruto. Seriously, it's giving me the creeps. I don't swing that way. And second, what makes you think I would tell you anything about my Rinnegan's abilities? Where the fun in that be? Unless, of course, you're willing to even up the odds by telling me every technique you know. Kukukuku, Orochimaru chuckled, though he looked angered at Naruto denying him information. The blonde smirked. He knew he was getting to the hubby Sannin. The man was not only insanely arrogant, even more than Naruto had been when fighting the Saint Beasts, he was also curious. Especially when it came to jutsu and Kekkei Genkai. By denying him information, Naruto pissed him off, and that would eventually make him sloppy. It seems you are not as dumb as everyone says you are. Gee, what gave that away? Asked Naruto in a sarcastic tone of voice. The fact that I'm kicking your ass. Or maybe the fact that I beat every single ninja I faced in the Chunin exams. When I was told you were a genius, I thought everyone meant ninja prodigy, not a master of stating the obvious. You are hardly close to beating me, Orochimaru said with a scowl, all traces of playfulness leaving his face. Do not presume that a child like you has any chance of defeating me, someone who has gone farther in his study of ninjutsu than anyone else in the world. Let me show you just how far you are from my level. Orochimaru began going through several hand seals, before slamming his hands into the ground. Kuchiyos. Edo Tensai, summoning technique. Resurrection of an impure world. 3 coffins began raising themselves from the ground, each one with a number on them numbering 1, 2, and 4. Naruto wasn't sure what this was, but he had a feeling this was the technique Orochimaru had needed kin for. He wondered what would happen to the corpse he had put in the one that said 1. Since they apparently needed a living sacrifice for the technique to work. Figuring he would find out, Naruto waited until the 3 coffins were fully raised from the ground. Each one fell back with a loud thud, then the coffins opened up, and from coffins 2 and 4, a person stepped out. What? Why isn't the Shodai coming out? Orochimaru looked into the first coffin and was shocked to see one of his shinobi inside. Dead. You. He raged at the blonde. You did this. This is how you found out about my invasion, isn't it? Naruto's eyes didn't even turn to acknowledge the man's words as he looked at the person in front of him. The man in front of him was fairly tall, just a little shorter than Naruto himself, and though his skin was ashen pale, Naruto knew it should be a light tan much like his own. He had bright blonde hair that was spiky and had 2 jaw-length bangs framing his face. Bright blue eyes much like the ones Naruto used to have adorned his face. His attire consisted of a standard Konoha nin uniform with 2 bands each on both of his sleeves, a flak jacket and a forehead protector. He was also wearing a haori that was decorated by flames-like motifs on the edges, with the kanji for Yondaime Hokage, 4th Fire Shadow, written vertically down the back, and closed on the front by a thin orange rope. This man was none other than Namikaze Minato. The two stared at each other for what felt like the longest time, but in truth had only been a few seconds. Finally, Minato's mouth opened and the first word he said was, Sochi. Those two words caused all the people within hearing distance to look between the two blondes in shock. Had they just heard right? Did Minato, the Yondaime Hokage, the Kuroi Senku, the greatest hero of Kana, call the Kyuubi Jinchuriki son? For the Anbu standing outside, it was like someone had dumped a bucket of cold water on them. While none had done anything to hurt Naruto, they hadn't done anything to help him either. Some had even turned a blind eye to the boy's plight when he ran into a drunken villager, letting the people take their anger out on the blonde before stepping in to stop it. And now they had just heard that the boy they had ignored and many hated was the son of their greatest hero. It was a bitter pill to swallow and one that was sure to cause an uproar among the people of Konoha. Naruto cracked a smile. What's up, San? I bet you never thought we'd actually meet, huh? Not really, Minato grimaced, not after what happened with Uchiha Madara. Naruto grinned at his father's surprised expression. Don't be so surprised. I know everything that happened during Ka-san's pregnancy. Well, most of what happened. I know that Madara somehow managed to know that the seal would weaken during childbirth, and I know that he was the one who released Kyuubi and made her attack the village. Yes, that's right, and wait. Her. The way Minato's eyes bulged as he heard that the fearsome Kyuubi no Yoko, the most powerful of the Biju, was in fact a female. Naruto chuckled. Surprised. So am I. I mean, it's not every day that you find out that your mind is being inhabited by a super hot female. When he saw his dad's eyes bug out even more, Naruto laughed. That's right. You only saw her fox form, huh? Let me assure you, San, her human form is exquisite. I don't even know what to say to that. Minato mumbled. The man beside him just looked lost. Said man had white shaggy hair, red eyes and 3 red streaks, 2 under his eyes and 1 on his chin. His outfit consisted of blue armor and a forehead protector which was modeled to resemble a face guard. The outfit underneath his armor had a white fur collar. Outside of his shinobi outfit, the man wore a simple blue shirt kimono held closed by a pale yellow sash and pants with mesh armor underneath, completed with a bracelet of sorts on his left hand. I'm not sure what's going on, he said, and Naruto turned to realize he was looking at the Nadaime Hokage, who was looking at him with red eyes. It seems you have quite the story to tell. However, I believe we were summoned here for a reason. That's right, Nadaime-sama, Yondaime-sama, Orochimaru said with a mocking smile as he said Minato's title. You two are here to kill dear Minato's son and help me destroy your home. He had been rather angry about not being able to summon the Shadaime, but learning that Naruto was in fact the son of the man he hated most made his anger disappear. Now he would force the man he hated more than even his own sensei to kill his son. While he had wanted Naruto's body, the hubby Sannin was beginning to think it was too much trouble. He would likely have to kill the boy before he could become a threat. Such a shame. With those pleasant thoughts in his mind, Orochimaru pulled out 2 kunai with several seal tags on them. He made to implant them in the head of the 2 he had summoned. However, before he could, a hand grabbed onto his. Looking from the hand, the hubby Sannin was just in time to see a hand with a spiraling ball of chakra in it, before it was plowed into his face. Rather than explode in a mass of gore and brains, Orochimaru melted into a pile of mud. Tch, Tsuchi Bunshin, mud clone, Minato muttered as he jumped back from the sword that threatened to impale him. He landed over near Naruto, and looked over where Orochimaru was standing with an angry glare on his face. How are you able to attack me? I revived you. You can't hurt the person who cast this jutsu. Orochimaru screamed, spittle actually coming out of his mouth. Naruto actually snickered at the sight of the famed hubby Sannin losing his cool. Minato just smiled. You obviously didn't read the fine print, did you, Orochimaru? Had you studied the jutsu in more depth, you would have known that one who has given himself to the Shinigami cannot be used by anyone except Shinigami-sama. When I sacrificed myself to seal Kyuubi into Naruto, the Shinigami claimed my soul and I now work for him. Mere mortal jutsu do not hold power over the one who controls the spirit realm. Orochimaru grit his teeth in anger and slight worry. This was not something he had expected, and it also meant trouble. Minato wasn't considered to be the most powerful shinobi to ever grace the elemental nations without good reason. Even without his Hiraishin no Jutsu, he was a powerful force to be reckoned with. Unfortunately, the hubby Sannin knew he was too far into this now to back down. If he tried to escape, it would leave his back exposed, and he had no doubt that Minato would take advantage of such an act. Never mind the fact that his son was capable of holding his own against him. Beside him, Tobirama was looking at Minato with newfound respect as he heard that he had sacrificed himself to the Shinigami. That was facing death with true courage. Fine, I'll just end the technique on you, Orochimaru said, however Minato just laughed. You can't end the technique anymore. The moment you summoned me to this plane, your ability to control me in any way was lost. That includes canceling the jutsu on me. Face Pedo Douche, you've lost, Naruto grinned at the man. Beside him, Minato's sweat dropped at hearing the very Kushina insult. And the best part is, you only have yourself to blame. Orochimaru snarled. No more talk. He violently shoved the kunai in Tobirama's head. The Nadaime Hokage straightened, his skin became pink and healthy but his eyes dulled as he fell to the control of the jutsu. Kill them. Tobirama started off at a slow gait, before speeding into a run. However, before he could get far, Naruto held out his hands and said, Shinra Tensei, heavenly subjugation of the omnipresent god. And the Nadaime Hokage was suddenly smashed by an invisible force and sent sailing backwards. Minato looked at his son with raised eyebrows. Is that an ability of the Rinnegan? Yep. Naruto looked at his dad with a smirk. Aside from being able to control all 5 elements, I can also control the 6th element, gravity. With my ability over gravity, I can attract or repel objects. And people. I can even change the gravity of something else and make things float. I haven't found out everything about these eyes yet, unfortunately. But I've learned some interesting techniques. Minato smiled before noticing Tobirama was getting back up. You'll have to tell me how you got those eyes. But it will need to be later. Right now we've got a battle on our hands. Not going to tell me I'm too young and to leave it to you? Asked Naruto with a raised eyebrow. Minato shook his head and smiled. From what I've seen since I got here, you were likely doing remarkably well. Especially since he summoned us to battle. Besides, you're my son. I have faith in you. Good thing too, Naruto chuckled as he turned towards the incoming cage. There is no way I'm going to be left out of the fun. Hey, you're just like Kushi-chan, Minato said right as Tobirama attacked them. The Yondaime Hokage ducked under the punch and sent nearly 10 of his own in quick succession. Too fast for any except Naruto himself to see. He ended his attack with an uppercut that caught the other revived cage flat-footed, sending the man sailing. Naruto nodded in approval. Not bad, old man, it looks like you've got this battle covered. In which case I'm going to go play with a certain snake. Sure, just leave this to me, Minato said as Tobirama created a giant wall of water, which came towards Minato. Said man went through several hand seals in quick succession, his fingers blurring. Doden. Doryuheiki, Earth Release. Earth-style wall. Birth of the new Demon King. Shinraken. Orochimaru was once again blown back as he was smashed with Naruto's gravity punch. He had actually been hoping to make his escape once the pair of blondes were busy with the Nadaime. However, life and karma seemed to have other plans for the hubby Sannin as Minato and Naruto decided to split up so they could have a pair of one-on-one fights. Now Orochimaru had to contend with the blonde he had been fighting previously, and things were not looking good. Sane Taijushu, many hidden shadow snake hands. Orochimaru shot several snakes out of his sleeves, all of them heading for Naruto in an attempt to harm the blonde in some way. Naruto planted his hands on the ground and said, Shinra Tensei, Genshukusha, heavenly subjugation of the omnipresent god, gravity well. The ground underneath the snakes burst open and they were all hit by an invisible force, getting sent high into the air. With the aim of his snakes off course, Orochimaru was left vulnerable, and Naruto came in and smashed his fist into the Sannin's gut. Orochimaru melted into mud and Naruto jumped back just as the man burst from the ground with a snake in his mouth, which was holding a sword in its mouth. The Sannin pulled the sword free and the snake went back down the man's throat. That is so gross, Naruto shuddered, but he still pulled his katana and wakizashi free. The blades of the swords, much like their general look, were both of opposites. The katana, which was called Kirise, Fox's Cry, had a blade of pure white, and it seemed to glow with a hidden power. The wakizashi went by the name Katunari, Fox's Howl, and held a blade that was pitch black. He held Kirise in front of him with a standard one-handed grip, and Katunari behind him in a reverse grip as he prepared to use them in their first real battle. Orochimaru came in fast and began attacking Naruto, using a combination of jabs and slices in his attempt to get through the blonde's guard. However, Naruto was more than up to the task of defending against the Sannin's attacks. Using Katunari, the blonde Uzumaki blocked all attacks from the Kusanagi, grass-cutter blade, surprising Orochimaru that his sword did not cut right through it. The Kusanagi was one of the most powerful swords in the world, and very few weapons save those used by the Kurashinobi Katana Nananshu were capable of withstanding it. With Kirise, Naruto made his own attempts at vivisecting his opponent. Orochimaru was forced to swerve around the katana so as not to get cut in half. The two broke apart after Orochimaru came in with a heavy swing from above, and Naruto blocked by bringing his blades into an X-guard. Deciding enough was enough, Naruto moved in to finish off his opponent. He came in fast and hard, and began using both blades to attack Orochimaru. Katunari he used for quick jabs and to get into Orochimaru's guard, or knock his blade out of the way. Kirise was used for power strikes and swings aimed at taking off limbs. It was during one of the moments where Katunari had knocked the Kusanagi away that Naruto managed to slice straight through Orochimaru's midsection, cutting the man in half. However, much to Naruto's shock and disgust, several snakes burst from two severed body parts and pulled the man back together. Growling in frustration, Naruto began attacking again, this time even more viciously than before. The hubby Sanin found himself being hard-pressed to defend himself against the blonde's powerful onslaught. While he had been careful not to get cut in half again, he began receiving several cuts along his arms and torso. He had to hold in a wince each time he got cut, as each wound he received felt like it either burned him, or sucked out his life essence, depending on the sword that caused the wound. Those are some rather interesting swords, Orochimaru commented as they jumped away from each other again. I'm rather curious to know where you got them. And once again, I'm rather curious to know why you think I'm going to tell you, said Naruto. Face it, unlike most shinobi, I actually hold to the common rule that deception and misdirection is a shinobi's bread and butter. I'm not going to tell you anything unless it would benefit me in some way. And telling you of the origins of my sword doesn't do that. Fine, Orochimaru said through grit teeth. This brat was getting on the last of his nerves, he had ruined everything the Sannin had worked for. Then you shall die and I'll just take them off of your corpse. Naruto just smiled. Oh, I think not, Orochimaru. Gah, Orochimaru's eyes widened as he felt a sword pierce through his chest. Looking down, he saw the black blade of Katunari sticking out. He looked up just in time to see the Naruto in front of him disappear in a puff of smoke, then turned around to see cold blue Rinnegan eyes staring at him from behind. When did you switch yourself out with a Kage Bunshin? When I cut you in half, replied Naruto. And now that I've got the real you, you're finished. This blade, Katunari, has a very unique ability. It can suck out the soul of anyone it stabs. A rather impressive ability if I do say so myself. That was why I felt so weak when it cut me, Orochimaru said with realization. Yep, each time it cut you it took a little piece of your soul, weakening you constantly. Unlike chakra, you cannot replace your soul, and it seems yours is rather small. Naruto wasn't sure why that was, but in the end it didn't matter. Goodbye, pedo douche. No, I am Orochimaru of the Sannin. Orochimaru screamed. Even as his skin began to age, wrinkles began forming and his face became sunken in. I am invincible, immortal, I can't be. The man screaming stopped as his body turned into a pile of ash. Naruto smiled as he blew away the dust with his Shinra Tensei. He looked over to see his father had just finished sealing up Tobirama. Deciding that his father had things well in hand, Naruto turned to the first person he saw keeping up the barrier. A frightened-looking girl with long, untamed, red hair. She also wore a black hat with bandages on the sides. You and your comrades will drop this barrier and surrender yourselves, Naruto said, his voice colder than a glacier, making the girl shiver. Any attempts at escape will end in your death, however if you surrender I promise to show you mercy and will allow you to live. Oh shit, this guy just fucking beat that cocksucker, Orochimaru, like it was nothing, and now he's staring at me. Were the first thoughts of the redhead. However, the boy's words penetrated her mind, and her sense of self-preservation kicked in. She immediately dropped the barrier, and knowing the blonde could and most likely would make good on his threat, decided to stay where she was. The three others were not so smart. They tried to escape, however, between the now revived Yondaime and the three Anbu, none escaped and they were all captured. What should we do them, Yondaime-sama? Asked Tenzo, deferring to the man who had once been a Kage. It was Naruto that answered. Take those three to Ibiki, get him to make them cough up the locations of everything they know on Orochimaru. His bases, enemy numbers, everything. When you're done, kill them. The three Anbu looked startled at being ordered by a kid, but seeing how he had just killed Orochimaru, none said anything. Though Tenzo did look at the Yondaime, who merely nodded. He nodded back and turned back to Naruto and asked, what about her? She has agreed to come quietly, so she will be escorted to POW. I myself will talk with her when the battle for Konoha has ended, Naruto said. He looked at one of the Anbu. You will escort her, and know this, she is not to be harmed since she has come willingly. If I find that one hair on her head has been hurt, I will be coming after you. The Anbu, Tori, gulped in fear, knowing that this kid could follow up on that threat. The girl, however, looked shocked at someone she just met protecting her. However, just as Tori was about to tell the girl to get moving, the redhead hissed in pain and was forced to her knees, while her hands flew to her neck. What the fuck? She shouted. Dear fucking Kami. This hurts like a motherfucking bitch. Shit. Naruto and Minato ignored the girl's profanity as they rushed over to her and pried the girl's hands away from her neck. That's Orochimaru's Juinjutsu, cursed seal, said Naruto with a frown. It looks like it's sizzling. The two watched as the seal cracked and hissed, slowly disappearing from the girl's skin. Within seconds the seal was gone, leaving a rather nasty-looking scar. Check the other three. See if their Juinjutsu seals are still there. Naruto ordered the Anbu. He looked at the redhead. Are you alright? What the fuck do you think? Of course I'm not fucking alright, shithead. She screamed at him. Right. New plan then, Naruto muttered before giving out his orders. Tori, get this girl to the hospital. Hi, the man shouted, almost out of reflex due to the commanding tone in his voice. Naruto pulled the girl up and handed her off to the bird-masked Anbu. He turned to his father when the man began jumping off. Are you ready? Minato smiled at his son, and there was a look of pride on his face. Of course, shall we kick these foreign ninja out of our home? I think you know the answer to that. Birth of the new Demon King. Doden. Doryuden Earth Release. Earth Dragon Bullet. Kaden. Enden Fire Release. Flame Bullet. A mound of mud rose up from the ground, shifting and morphing to take on the shape of a dragon head. The creature opened its mouth and several tons of mud were blasted out, sweeping up many of the Odo ninja in front of Sarutobi away. A few more hand seals later and Sarutobi blew a stream of fire out of his mouth, which connected with the earth and lit the mud into a blaze. Soon, the screams of Odo ninja dying were heard as they were burned to a crisp under the combined assault of the Sandame's collaboration jutsu. Going through more hand seals, the aging Hokage slammed his palms on the ground and shouted, Kuchio's number jutsu, Enku Enma, summoning technique, Monkey King Enma. There was a large puff of smoke, which soon cleared to reveal a large monkey. To be more specific, it was an ape. Enma's body was covered by white fur which protrude from his sleeves and pants. He had long white hair and sideburns as well as a goatee. His tail was also white. He was wearing a black suit with mesh armor underneath, over which he wore a sleeveless kimono shirt with white trimmings and markings reminiscent of tiger stripes on it, held closed by a sash. Enma also had on a Konoha forehead protector. Enma, I would like your help in ridding Konoha of these invaders. Sarutobi said. Very well, I shall aid you in this Sarutobi, Enma said as the two began to work together. Sarutobi and Enma began moving into the area which was thickest with enemy ninja, fighting together to overpower any shinobi they could get their hands on. While they were battling however, they both received the shock of their lives as Uzumaki Naruto appeared to fight with them. And he was with none other than Namikaze Minato. Minato-kun, Sarutobi whispered in shock as the pair of blondes crashed into the battle with all the subtlety of a battering ram. The father and son duo took to pulverizing the Odo ninja with a combination of finesse and brute force, Minato being the finesse and Naruto just pounding them into the dirt until they died, to defeat any who stood before them. Minato turned to look at the aging Sandame and grinned. Hey Sarutobi-san. Can't talk now, me and my son have to help with the invasion. The aging Hokage merely nodded mutely, unable to even think much less try and comprehend the fact that Minato was standing before him, alive and well. What is going on here? Asked Enma as he smashed his fist into an Odo Kunoichi's face. Correct me if I'm wrong, but didn't Minato die sealing the Kyuubi? Yes, he did. Sarutobi snapped himself out of his funk and began fighting again. He couldn't afford to get distracted. However, Orochimaru may have used that jutsu to bring Minato back to life. Though, if he did, I don't know why he's fighting for us and not doing Orochimaru's bidding. I suppose in the end it doesn't matter, said Enma. Let us finish this, we can get our answers later. Sarutobi gave an absent nod as he got back to work. Birth of the new Demon King. The appearance of Namikaze Minato fighting alongside Uzumaki Naruto sent shockwaves through the remaining Konoha shinobi. None could believe that their hero had returned and was battling with their foes like he had never left. Many of Konoha figured that the Yondaime had somehow managed to come back to life, or never died to begin with and had just been waiting for the right time to come out of hiding. The one other thing that everyone noticed and were shocked about, was the fact that the Yondaime Hokage was fighting alongside Naruto. A fact which confused many of the ninja forces. Despite their confusion, everyone rallied behind the two powerful shinobi. With renewed strength, determination and moral, Konoha drove off the invading Odo forces alongside the Suna ninja that had turned on their supposed allies. With the loss of their leader, the appearance of Naruto and the reappearance of the Yondaime Hokage, the ninja of Odo began to lose heart. Many had attempted to retreat, only to be cut down by the father and son duo who used their immense speed and power to blindside the Odo ninja. Naruto, wielding his Rinnegan, had used his control over gravity to keep the Odo forces from running away, while Minato sped into their ranks and decimated them. Even though he did not have any Hiraishin Kunai on him and was thus incapable of using his signature technique, was still faster than anyone had any right to be. It wasn't long before the Odo forces had either been killed or surrendered. Phew, Naruto said as he wiped some sweat from his brow. Man, this has been quite a day. First I fight the Hyuga prodigy, then the Shukaku Jinchuriki, next was Orochimaru, and now I just helped drive an invading force out of Konoha. An all-around good day. Minato chuckled at his son's nonchalance. And now we'll be able to get some well-deserved rest, and you can tell me about how your life has been. The older blonde didn't miss the wince his son did, and a frown marred his face. Before he could ask about it, another voice shouted his name. Minato. Minato. Turning, the two blondes watched as Jiraiya jumped down from the roof and stopped in front of the two of them. Minato blinked. Jiraiya-sensei. When I heard you were alive I didn't believe it. I almost still don't believe. The white-haired man said. He looked at Minato suspiciously. How are you alive? I'll explain later, sensei, Minato said. For now, let's just say Orochimaru is an idiot and leave it at that. Wait, Naruto said, catching the attention of the two men. This is Jiraiya, the Jiraiya. Jiraiya grinned at the younger blonde. Yes, that is right, it is I, the great Jiraiya saw. Ah. Minato, Hiruzen and the many shinobi who were present winced in sympathy as Naruto kicked the Gamma Sannin in the balls, hard. A few even reflexively cupped their nads, as if feeling the pain merely by seeing Jiraiya's getting damaged. What was that for? Squeaked out Jiraiya, his voice sounding very much like Unik. That, Naruto said with a grim smile. That was for not taking care of me, or even coming to visit me, Kyofu. Jiraiya paled, then went even paler as he saw Minato's look darken. If they did not look so different, many would have assumed Jiraiya was Orochimaru due to how pale he was. Thankfully for Jiraiya, Sarutobi herded the attention away from his doomed student. Minato, I have to ask, how is it that you are here? I saw your body after defeating the Kyuubi. You and... The Sandaime paused, looking over at Naruto. What? Naruto said with a shrug. I already know my parents were the Yondaime and Uzumaki Kushina. Why you knew? Sarutobi stuttered. Many of the ninja forces that were near enough to hear began whispering. Seeing the look on Naruto's face, the Sandaime asked, for how long? Since the forest of death where I went through my transformation, Naruto replied carefully. Why didn't you say anything? Asked Sarutobi. Naruto shrugged. Why didn't you? The aging Hokage winced at the dull tone in the boy's voice. He had honestly hoped it would be someone else's responsibility to inform Naruto of his parents. That the blonde already knew, and didn't let Sarutobi know that he knew, meant he no longer trust the Sandaime enough to talk to him. Naruto, save your platitudes for someone who needs them, Naruto interrupted, though his words sounded harsh, his tone was not. It was the kind of voice someone used when they had already accepted what had happened to them and moved on. What's done is done, and while I don't like you keeping my heritage from me, especially since you always told me you didn't know, I understand why you did it. It's in the past, and that is where it shall stay. I would rather not play. Whose fault is it, with you? Let's just focus on the now, K. Very well, Sarutobi said, relieved and happy to see Naruto did not seem to hold a grudge against him. The Hokage may have lost his trust, but at least the young blonde was willing to forgive his transgressions. Why don't we discuss everything in my office? I have many questions, and I am sure you do as well, Minato. Hi, that's true. I have a lot I want to ask you, and a lot I need to tell you, Minato said. As Naruto is integral to this discussion, and deserves to hear everything we say, he will be coming with us. I understand, Sarutobi said. He looked down at Jiraiya who was still curled up on the ground holding his junk. Jiraiya, get off the ground. I want you to be at this meeting. Right, Jiraiya said, standing as if nothing had happened and he was perfectly fine. Though Naruto noticed with a satisfied smirk that the man was walking a little bow-legged. The four ninja began making their way through the crowd, heading towards the Hokage Tower, where a long discussion awaited them. Now then, Sarutobi said as he, Naruto, Minato and Jiraiya all sat down in the Hokage's office. While it is truly great to see you again, Minato, I have to ask. How is it that you are alive? Minato leaned back against his seat, a small smile on his face, the kind he had when he had a secret that he found amusing. I'll tell you, but I don't want any interruptions. Okay. When the two older ninja who had not been present for his rebirth both agreed, Minato nodded and continued. Orochimaru revived me via the Edo Tensei. He revived not only me, but the Nadim Hokage as well. A frown marred the blonde's face. He had also tried summoning the Shodai, but for some reason it didn't work and Shadaime-sama wasn't revived. That would be my fault, Naruto admitted, causing all eyes to turn on him. I was on my way back to Konoha when I ran into a hidden outpost with Odo ninja guarding it. I thought it was strange and decided to investigate. What I found, Naruto growled, and for a moment everyone in the room leaned back as killing intent leaked out of the blonde. It left a second later as Naruto visibly calmed down. I found one of the 3 Odo genin that had been in the Chunin exams, one Tsuchi-kin. The Odo Jonin had raped her, multiple times if my guess is correct. I killed most of the Jonin except one, and interrogated him. That was how you knew of the invasion, Sarutobi said in realization. Naruto nodded. Correct. Anyways, after I had pulled every iota of knowledge from the man's mind, I killed him and stuffed his corpse into the coffin. Which is why the technique didn't work, Minato said with a nod. Edo Tensei requires a living sacrifice to work. Nadim-sama originally created the jutsu to revive ninja who had died while delivering important information. I'm guessing that once he finished it, he ended up deciding to go further than he had first wanted. In any case, he revived myself and Nadim-sama to help him kill Naruto and destroy Konoha. Now the reason I didn't end up becoming Orochimaru's puppet is quite simple. I gave my life to Koenma-sama. Koenma who? Asked Naruto. Koenma-sama's the guy in charge of the spirit world. At the blank looks he was getting from everyone else in the room, he elaborated. That's where people go when they die. The three others gained a look of understanding and he continued. So basically he's the one calling all the shots. When Orochimaru tried to revive me, he felt this was the perfect opportunity to get a presence here in the elemental nations. What do you mean a presence? Asked Naruto. Minato paused and gained a thoughtful look, as if trying to decide how best to explain the situation. I mean, he wanted someone who works for him to be stationed in the elemental nations. It's not known to us, but when the ninja world started using chakra, it created a barrier between us and the spirit world. As you know, chakra is comprised of a combination of spiritual energy and physical energy. Well, the physical energy is actually blocking Koenma's influence here, and because there are so many chakra users, it's actually created a literal barrier around the elemental nations that keep his agents from getting in. And that's where you come in, said Naruto with a frown. He made use of Orochimaru's jutsu to bring you back to life to work for him because he had no one working in the elemental nations for him. Well, there was one person who used to, Minato said. I don't know much, but I heard that there was a woman named Botan who was here in the elemental nations that helped Koenma-sama ferry the souls of the dead across the River of Styx. However, she disappeared around 18 years ago and no one's even heard from her since. I'm still not really sure I understand, Jiraiya said, scratching the back of his head as a confused expression crossed his face. You're telling me you're working for the guy in charge of this spirit world place, and that he made use of Orochimaru's stupidity to bring you back to life? I know, it doesn't seem possible, Minato said, understanding his sensei's skepticism that there was someone who had that kind of power over life and death. There was also another reason he let me come back. I happen to be one of his best workers, and having sacrificed myself to save my village in my past life, he respected me. And I guess he felt bad that I never even got to spend time with my son before dying. There were a few moments of silence at that, before Minato continued. So he gave me my life back, or at least some of it. I get to live for however long the person who was sacrificed to bring me to life had already lived for, and hopefully in that time I'll be able to establish a connection between the elemental nations and the spirit world. If Kin was one of the sacrifices, then logic would dictate that the other was her teammate, Zaku, Naruto said. He was 14, I think. Minato nodded at his son's statement. Now then, you all know how I'm here. There are some things I need to tell you. Minato's demeanor became much more serious. Recognizing the look, both Sarutobi and Jiraiya followed suit. Now Naruto already knows this, but I figured it wouldn't hurt to let you two in on this. On what? Asked Sarutobi. On the truth, Minato answered grimly. The truth of what happened the night of Naruto's birth and the Kyuubi attack. He looked at the two older ninja, seeing that they were both serious and apprehensive. It wasn't surprising, they must have wondered for years about that night. Wondered how the Kyuubi could escape when he was keeping a watch on the seal. It probably plagued them for a long time. I suppose we should start with a bit of background history, just to give us some context, Minato said. Everyone here knows how the Shodai-sama's wife, Mito-sama, turned herself into the Jinchuriki for the Kyuubi during Hashirama-sama's battle with Madara at the Valley of the End. Mito-sama was from the Uzumaki clan of Uzu no Kuni, Land of Whirlpools, and Uzushiogakure, village hidden among eddies. Due to their special chakra, the people of the Uzushio were blessed with naturally long lives, to the point it became known as the Village of Longevity. Also, the members of the Uzumaki clan were unparalleled masters of the art of fuinjutsu. So, using her skills, Mito-sama sealed the fox spirit away, becoming the first Kyuubi Jinchuriki. Later, as she was nearing the end of her life, Naruto's Ka-san, Uzumaki Kushina, was brought to Konoha so she could become the new Jinchuriki. I don't really the reason she was chose for this, just that she was. I didn't find out about this until we started dating. We had actually met in the academy at first, and to be honest, your mom didn't like me. Minato smiled at his son's confused look. She thought I was flaky, even called me girly. Naruto chuckled as his father continued. She was actually a very hot-headed girl, and a tomboy to boot. She would always beat on the other kids that would pick on her for her red hair. They usually called her Tomato. Because of those two facts, your mom was given the nickname Shishio no Habanero, red hot-blooded habanero. So anyways, one day, she was kidnapped by Kumogakure because your mom was the last person to manifest the Uzumaki clan's Kekkei Genkai. They could produce chakra chains that could restrain the Biju much like Shodai-sama's Mokuden Jutsu. I think that's probably why she was chosen to be the Jinchuriki. She managed to leave a trail using her hair, and I was able to track down the two Chunin who had captured her, and saved her. We started dating shortly after that. However, the Third Great War began a year later, so we didn't get to see each other too much. It lasted a good number of years, and during that time I trained Kakashi, Rin, and Obito and developed both my Hiraishin no Jutsu and the Rasengan. Once the war ended, Me and your mom married and you came along soon after. Minato closed his eyes and it looked like he was struggling to say what he needed to say. Now, I suppose I've stalled long enough. It was only a few years after Kushina and I got married that she got pregnant. As you can imagine, we were pretty happy. Jiraiya snorted. Pretty happy. Kid, the first time you found out Kushina was pregnant, you ran out of the room screaming, "My wife is pregnant." Like an idiot. Minato blushed. Actually, the first time I heard Kushina was pregnant, I sort of fainted. Silence. Pure silence reigned in the room before Naruto began laughing. Are you serious? Said Naruto, guffawing loudly. The great Yondaime Hokage, most feared ninja in the elemental nations, can't handle learning his wife is pregnant. Minato blushed even more. Well, I was surprised. He coughed into his hand several times as he tried to get back on track. Anyways, we were happy and we made all these plans for your room and what we would name you. You know, we named you after he character in Jiraiya's book. You mean his first book, said Naruto. Excuse me. His first book. Arrow Senin over there has more than one book out. Naruto grinned when he heard a shout of disrespectful brats from Jiraiya and continued. Nowadays he writes porn novels. Minato really didn't know what to say to that. It was more or less what he expected of his sensei. The man had tried to peek on him and Kushina having sex after all. He decided to just continue with his story. However, both of us were worried as well. There is only one point that the seal that binds the Kyuubi is the weakest. That is during childbirth. All three of you know this. The energy used to power the seal is diverted to help the baby grow. The seal weakens in direct proportion, and a full-term pregnancy is a whole 10th months, and that night, someone attacked. I don't know how he knew, but he knew the exact moment that the seal was at weakest. So, it was October 10th, just over 13 years ago. Birth of the new Demon King. Flashback. A 10-month pregnant Namikaze Kushina was sitting at her dining room table with her husband Minato leaning forward, one hand on the back of her chair, and the other on the table top. Across from them sat the Sandaime Hokage and his wife. Minato stood as he spoke. I'll be there for the birth. We have to take care of the seal and everything. I'll get everything prepared beforehand. This is what we did for your predecessor, Mito-sama, as well, Sarutobi spoke as he held his pipe in his hand. The seal nearly failed when she gave birth. I'm afraid we'll need to prepare for the worst. We'll set up a place outside the village and erect a barrier to protect it. Only Minato, my wife Bawako, and Taji from the Anbu will be inside. This must be kept top secret. Of course there will be reinforcements outside, Anbu under my direct command. I'll tell Yiz where the place is, so get your things ready. Yes, thank you both, Kushina responded, looking a little bit nervous. Birth of the new Demon King. Sarutobi Bawako and Namikaze Kushina were making their way out of the village when they ended up running into one of Kushina's lifelong friends, Uchiha Makoto. As Kushina stopped to say hi, she noticed the baby in the other woman's arms. Didn't you have a girl? Kushina asked with surprise evident in her voice. Makoto gave her longtime friend a smile, but shook her head. Nope, another boy. Well, what's his name, Makoto? Kushina pressed. Sasuke, Makoto answered. There was a proud smile on her face as she looked down at her sleeping son. The name struck a chord with the elder woman of the trio, and Bawako spoke up. Ah, the same name as the Sandaime's father. Yes, I'm sure he'll become a fine shinobi, Makoto agreed. Then she looked back up at her red-haired friend and grinned as she continued, You're almost due, aren't you, Kushina? You should pick out a name before it's too late. Kushina smiled brightly as a hand raised up to her chest's level in a sign of thoughtful excitement. We've got one, Naruto. He and Sasuke-kun will be in the same grade, I hope they become friends. A look of fear and nervousness seemed to clash down around the expecting mother as she leaned forward and whispered with her hands around her mouth, as if asking was taboo, by the way, does it hurt? Like, bad. Makoto chuckled. Well, even you're afraid of something. I'll be. By this time, Bawako had had enough and dragged Kushina away by the wrist. Come on already. Oh, sorry. Kushina apologized, waving back at the Uchiha clan's matriarch. Yane, Makoto responded, waving farewell to the redhead. Remember, Bawako chastised after they were far enough away, we need to keep your birth classified. Try not to talk to anyone while we're on the move, even your friends. Right, sorry about that, Kushina acknowledged with a nervous hand rubbing her head. The fact that we're leaving the village is classified as well. Bawako snapped as she turned to face Kushina. Don't go screaming your head off, even when the contractions start. Right. Birth of the new Demon King. The Anbu guard standing outside a sealed cave heard, oh god, it hurrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrr labor pains. Minato was looking rather harried as he stared at his wife in blatant worry. I've never heard Kushina in so much pain. Are you sure she's alright? She's fine. Just keep your eyes on the seal. Bawako snapped at her husband's successor. But, she's. Good lord, you're the Yondaime Hokage. Don't panic. She continued to yell at him. This is why women have babies. You men can't handle the pain. Minato gulped as he felt the seal on his wife's abdomen pulse with energy, signaling that the Kyuubi was trying to break free. U. Kushina moaned as another powerful contraction hit her. It's so strong, was the only thought that ran through her husband's mind as he used his chakra to strengthen the seal. I can feel the fox trying to break out. Hang in there, Kushina. Hang in there, Naruto, he muttered as he continued to fight back the fox. MMMMNNNNNNNNN. Kushina's moan as she felt Naruto trying to exit her womb racked her body and her eyes clenched shut in agony. The head's out. Almost there, Kushina. Bawako cheered as she helped the baby from his mother's birth canal. Taji, the attending medic, also provided encouragement. Keep going, Kushina-san. Then, both Minato and Kushina felt the fox trying to break free once more, but Minato surged his chakra from his hand and into the seal with a cry, Naruto, get out here. And Kyuubi, you stay right where you are. MMMNH. Kushina whined as she gave one final push, her son finally free of his mother's uterus. Cries from the infant filled the cave-turned hospital room and Bawako ordered Taji to get some hot water. He snapped to and rushed to the table where the basin waited. It's okay, Minato muttered in shock while Kushina panted, trying to rest her labored body. The baby Naruto continued to cry as he was washed clean of his mother's bodily fluids and Bawako announced with joy, congratulations, it's a healthy baby boy. Ha ha ha. Minato wiped his eyes from their tears of joy, look at me, I'm a father. Bawako handled the blanketed Naruto and carried him up next to his mother's head as he continued to cry. Kushina's own tear-laced eyes turned to happiness as she leveled her gaze on her child. Naruto, I finally get to meet you. She would have continued, but Naruto was taken by Bawako to be cared for as Minato spoke. Okay, Kushina. I know you're exhausted from the birth, but we've got to get the Kyuubi completely sealed. She huffed. Right. Just as he was about to stabilize the seal, two unmistakable cries of people dying ripped through their ears. Bawako-sama. Taji. Minato roared. His attention was grabbed by a new person who had somehow bypassed the guards and the barrier, wearing a hooded black cloak and an orange mask with black stripes and a single eye hole where the right eye should be. He was holding the baby in his arm, one arm prepared to strike Naruto. Yondaime Hokage, Minato. Back away from the Jinchuriki or your son dies at the ripe age of 1 minute. Minato's eyes narrowed as two thoughts ran through his mind. How did he break through the barrier? Who the hell is this guy? The blonde Hokage was about to move to attempt to rescue his newborn son when Kushina moaned as the Kyuubi began to push for its freedom from the seal on her exposed stomach. Kushina, he cried. The seal's not done. The masked assailant produced a kunai in his left hand and threatened the Hokage once more. Back away from the Jinchuriki, or don't you care if your son dies? Hold it, Jay, just calm down. Minato pleaded, raising his hand up in a reaching gesture as Kushina experienced another wave of pain. Then, to Minato's much growing fear, the man threw Naruto into the air. You should take your own advice, Minato. I'm perfectly calm, the man berated. Naruto. Kushina cried while her husband's gaze turned absolutely murderous as the wailing newborn and the man drew the kunai down in preparation for an upwards thrust. The next moment, Minato had Naruto in his arms as he rested his feet against the wall behind his attacker. You live up to the Kuroi Senku moniker, but what now? The man quipped with a backwards glance. Minato glanced down, seeing smoke flow up from the bottom of the baby blanket, and he recognized the flow as that of multiple paper bombs. A quick movement of his hands later and Minato separated the child from the impending explosion. Minato. Naruto. Kushina cried when she noticed the man in her life and her newborn son disappear. Birth of the new Demon King. The house went up in fire and smoke as it exploded, and Minato, using his body to protect his and his wife's baby, was thrown away from the blast. Thank Kami. You're not hurt. Minato breathed a sigh of relief as he caught his breath while sitting on the ground, cradling the shrieking infant who obviously did not like all the jostling. Ow. Minato winced as he finally registered the pain of a small piece of wood that had embedded itself in his lower right shin, through his pants and wrappings. He plucked the wood out and his mind was already trying to figure out why they had been attacked. He's after Kushina. He forced me to use my Hiraishin no Jutsu to separate us. Gotta hurry. He used his Hiraishin once more to get Naruto to another house. He then quickly placed Naruto in the bed-sized crib and wrapped a blanket around him. You'll be safe here, he mentioned, although he may have been trying to reassure himself. You'll wait here on your own for a bit, Naruto. I've gotta go save your mom before it's too late. Birth of the new Demon King. Kushina was strung up with chains binding her wrists that were tethered to several giant boulders jutting up from a mountain lake. Kanji were drawn around 4 vertical pieces of stone and along the chains, forming a seal, as the seal on Kushina gullet spread so that it began to manifest itself on the lower portion of her face. In her weakened condition, she was forced to kneel on another stone as the cloaked man stood before her and she pried for information. What are you after? I came to rip the Kyuubi from your stomach and use it to crush Konoha, the man answered. What? Minato's teleportation jutsu use a special marking that lets him instantly move from one marking to the next, the man continued. I see he's incorporated it into the design of your seal. The man's head lifted and in the eyelet of his mask, a fully mature, 3-tomo Sharingan was revealed, also he would always be there to protect you, but I managed to get away from him. And the seal has been greatly weakened from the birth. Do you have any idea how long I've waited for this moment? Realization began to dawn on the new mother and her eyes locked with the Sharingan as it peered into her, allowing the man to enter the seal's inner construct where the Kyuubi was bound by chains to a large ball with each of its tails staked into it as well, along with its torso and all 4 paws. It tried to fight off its assailant's genjutsu, but the Sharingan prevailed and its slitted eyes shone with the Sharingan, the indicator that the man's control was a success. The chains began to melt and the stakes disappeared, allowing the fox's chakra to manifest as a chakra cloak around Kushina, who screamed in agony when the fox began to emerge from the seal. Her captor brought his right up in a hand seal and uttered his first command to his new beast, come forth, Kyuubi no Yoko. And with a roar that shook the heavens, the full form of the beast emerged from its host. Below, the man turned from Kushina who had collapsed now that the chains were no longer holding her up and he commanded once more, we head for Konohagakure no Sato. Stop. A severely weakened Kushina squeaked out. The man did stop and turned back in slow surprise, the Uzumaki clan is really something special. Even wrenching a biju from your body didn't kill you right away. The fox above growled and the man spoke once more, mentally commanding the monstrous fox to smash the woman, it's only fitting for the Kyuubi to kill its former Jinchuriki. And just like that, the fox smashed its paw down where Kushina was laying, sprawled across the rock, unable to move, and upon contact, the section of ground exploded from the sheer amount of power exuded from said biju. As the dust settled, Minato was crouching on top of a large tree, cradling his wife against himself. A small glimmer of hope, their enemy scoffed. But it's too late. Minato. Kushina huffed and struggled to speak. Is Naruto okay? The Yondaime smiled down at her. Yes, he's fine. I hid him somewhere safe. Oh, thank Kami. Kushina sighed, happy as any mother would be when knowing that their child was safe from harm. Minato. Stop him. Stop the Kyuubi. They're headed for the village. An unhappy Minato sighed as Kushina's eyes closed from exhaustion and he vanished with her. The man who had attacked merely looked on and spoke for no reason than to hear himself speak, gone again, no matter, on to Konoha. Birth of the new demon king. The couple arrived via the Hiraishin and Kushina asked her spouse, why? Never mind why. Stay with Naruto, her husband answered while he placed her beside their baby. Her eyes cracked open slowly and lay on her finally sleeping son. Naruto, she cried as she wrapped an arm around him as he lay beneath the blanket. She continued to cry as she pulled him close and the side of his head rested against her own. Minato, thank you, she managed to get out as the man clenched his fists and stomped the floor in anger. I'll be back before you know it, he proclaimed while slipping his signature Hokage Haori over his Junin vest. Birth of the new demon king. A 5-year-old Uchiha Itachi was sitting on the porch that ran along the perimeter of the courtyard that the main family's dining room looked out upon. In his arms was his baby brother, Sasuke, who was sleeping rather peacefully when a something washed over the older son of Makoto. What's this awful feeling? He muttered as he looked up into the night sky. NMMMMM, the infant began to squirm before crying out, forcing his older brother to try and rock him back to sleep with reassuring words. What an awful feeling, Itachi thought again. Why did Ka-chan and Tu-san have to go out now? He then redirected his attention back to his brother once more. Don't cry Sasuke, your Ni-san is here to protect you, no matter what happens. Birth of the new demon king. Many of the village's ninja were beginning to unwind for the day and were saying their farewells to their friends for the night. 2 in particular though, had just met up with one another and the vastly more eccentric was demanding a challenge from his eternal rival. Why don't we just go with rock paper scissors today? Kakashi asked as he walked down the street with his hands in his pockets. Not again. I want a more hot-blooded contest. Guy protested with a very childlike attitude. And you call yourself my rival? Ignoring him, Kakashi examined his left hand as it gained a nervous tremor. Hey Guy, do you sense something off? Like there's an awful chill in the air. Why do you have to act like this? We'll only be young once. Guy continued with his rants on the youthfulness of youth. Birth of the new demon king. Minato's predecessor was reading from a report while smoking on his pipe when he too felt the same ominous feeling that Kakashi and Itachi were both experiencing. He looked out his window while exhaling a stream of smoke. It couldn't be, he thought. Unfortunately, it was, because a moment later, the same man who had attacked the Yondaime and his family, and unleashed the Kyuubi, materialized just inside the village's walls and used a summoning jutsu. Attack, Kyuubi no Yoko. The man commanded, and the Kyuubi flared its yuki while smashing buildings, causing many people to fly away from the sheer power it unleashed. Some of the villagers, however, were not caught in the initial assault and looked up in pure, unadulterated fear. Sandaime-sama. One of the Anbu appeared before Sarutobi. It's the Kyuubi. The Kyuubi attacked the village out of nowhere. Sarutobi, though, was in motion before the man even arrived, placing his battle-worn bracer on his right forearm as he responded, I know, I'll hold it back. Gather and protect the civilians. Hi. The man acknowledged and disappeared as quickly as he had arrived. Sarutobi then sighed while thinking, did Kushina's seal fail? Were all the safeguards we put in place really not enough? Birth of the new Demon King. In a crouch, the Yondaime Hokage appeared, arriving on top of the most vertical rock that represented his spiky hair. The Kyuubi noticed immediately and turned his attention towards the most dangerous threat to its existence as the man stood up straight, the wind dramatically blowing his hair and Haori to his left as it whipped by him. So you noticed me already, he commented dryly and watched as the Kyuubi pulled its chakra to its mouth, condensing it into a large and lethal ball of energy. Not on my watch. Minato retaliated as he began to run through some hand seals while the demon launched its attack at him. As it closed in on Minato, it suddenly disappeared and a large seal appeared in the sky in a dome fashion. When the seal faded, Minato was holding both of his hands out before him, fingers spread, the pointer fingers and thumbs touching each other, and held in place by his chakra was one of his Hiraishin tri-prong kunai. Gotta pick a safe place to let that huge blast detonate, he thought, before picking the exit seal, 5 miles behind Konoha, away from the village. Down below, one Akamichi Shuza commented on the spectacle, it stopped the Kyuubi's attack, that was a Jikuken Kekkei ninjutsu. It's Minato. Shuza's longtime friend, Nara Shikaku, announced, the Junin commander rallying the morale of the villagers. Everyone move out. They then heard the Sandaime command. Shouts of, hi, resonated as the Konoha ninja began to counterattack. Back with Minato though, he was preparing to shunshin to Hiruzen's side, thinking, I have to tell the Sandaime what happened, when the same man who had attacked him prior, rose up from the top of his face on the mountain. Forced to deal with the man, Minato whipped around, and attempted to drive one of his signature kunai knives into the man's head. But, much to his shock and dismay, the blade phased through him and as the blade cleared, his opponent reached out and grabbed the Hokage's arm. You will face me, the man stated. And we're done. Immediately, the man opened a spiraling vortex that attempted to suck in Minato. But, Minato's Hiraishin was faster, and he escaped the man's trap. He teleported, the man commented in an odd tone. Talk about fast. Next time, I'll warp you the moment I lay my hand on you. Birth of the new Demon King. Minato appeared, skidding across the ground with a grunt, my attack slipped right through him. But a moment later he was solid and tried to suck me into some dimension or something. What was that move? A humming sound alerted Minato to said man's arrival, who spoke as he solidified, you won't escape me. As the two opposing super ninjas stared each other down, Minato's brain was searching for a solution. What is that? Is it a Jikunin jutsu? Whatever he did, it must be how he moved so far after taking Kushina. He defeated Anbu under the direct command of the Sandaime, got past the most top secret barrier we have, and must have known the seal would be weak while Kushina was giving birth. Then with the seal undone he took the Kyuubi and marched straight into Konoha without so much as pausing to deal with the barrier. There's only man I can think of that makes sense. Are you Uchiha Madara? Minato questioned. The man didn't answer, choosing instead to remove the hood from his head, revealing short spiky dark hair. No, you couldn't be, Minato continued. He's long dead. Oh, the man interrupted. I don't know about that. Minato continued as if he did not hear. On second thought, it doesn't matter who you are. But why have attacked Konoha? Oh, you know, it's part of my plan, to start a war, to bring peace. Whoever he is, he's incredible. Minato's thoughts began to fire again. He can control the Kyuubi, wields time-space jutsu that far exceeds that of Nadaime-sama, and clearly has evil intentions. If I don't kill him now, he'll become a greater threat than the fox. Minato stood, prepared to fight, a plan forming. If I teleport back to the village he'll just follow me and things will get even more chaotic. If he really is Madara, then I doubt he can summon the Kyuubi for very long. I'll just have to leave the village in the Sandaime's hands and finish him off right here. There's no hope for any of you. Madara jested as he charged his adversary, a chain, hooked to both wrists, trailing behind himself. As they drew close, Madara phased through Minato's body, and the chain, upon reaching Minato, wrapped around him once Madara snapped his arms around in an attempt to stop Minato's movements. When Madara tried to rip the chain through the Hokage's torso, Minato activated his Hiraishin and teleported to the special kunai that he had used to arrive earlier, escaping the would-be fatal attack. That attack was enough for Minato to understand Madara's strategy as he glanced over his shoulder, eyeing Madara who returned the stare. He makes his body intangible to negate my attacks, then solidifies to counterattack. My only shot is to try and trade hits with him. But attacking at all is a big risk for him. If he can only keep the Kyuubi summoned for a short time, he won't want this fight to drag on. They dashed again, but this time, Minato was armed with another of his kunai. During the rush, the blonde had another thought: it comes down to speed, whoever strikes a split second earlier will win. When they reached 5 feet from one another, Minato slung his kunai forward, watching as it phased through Madara's head. When the pommel was the last part to pass through him, Madara reached forward to grab a hold of Naruto's father as the man charged a Rasengan up in his right hand. Gotch, Madara thought as his hand connected with Minato's shoulder, briefly, before the man disappeared. Ghagh! He exclaimed when Minato suddenly appeared above him, and pushed the Rasengan into his back, shredding through the cloak and piercing the flesh as it drove Madara into the dirt. Damn it! He teleported to the kunai he just threw. That was the Hiraishin no Jutsu, level 2, Minato boasted as he continued to force his chakra sphere into the rogue Uchiha. Madara forced himself to use his phasing technique once more to slip away with a pained groan. When he put some distance between him and Minato, he realized that his left arm was dripping copious amounts of blood and was unable to be moved. And before he could anything else, a glaring Minato materialized before him, via Hiraishin, with a kunai in his left hand poised to gut Madara, and his right hand planting itself on Madara's torso. The Hiraishin no Jutsu, Madara mentally screamed. He must have put that marking somewhere on my body. It was after that thought that Madara realized that Minato was implanting a seal on him and roared, a contract seal. Are you trying to pull the Kyuubi from my control? No, Minato retorted. I already did. The Kyuubi is no longer your weapon. Birth of the new Demon King. At that moment, the severing of the control was completed and the Sharingan disappeared from the Kyuubi's eyes as he roared. Amongst the rubble below, the child of 2 of Konoha's Junin was trying to help his injured mother. Iruka, are you hurt? His mother asked as blood leaked from her mouth. Mom, the young boy started, fear gripping him like a choking hand. Dad, Moms. I'll take care of your mother, the addressed man shouted back to his son. You get out of here. No way, Dad. I can't leave you and Mom alone. I'll protect her. Iruka protested, only to be stopped in his tracks by his father's angry yell. Cut the crap, he told Iruka. Parents are supposed to protect their children. At the wall, thanks to Minato's actions, the Sandaime and many of the village's most powerful ninja including Akamichi Torun, Mitokado Homura, and Udatane Kaharu were able to drive the Biju out into the forests that surrounded Konoha, preventing any more casualties. Don't stop setting traps. One of the Junin who charged the beast shouted as many ninja continued to leap at it, fully intent on slaying the monstrous creature. Birth of the new Demon King. Madara escaped by teleporting to a mid-level branch that looked down on the man who had stopped him and complimented, you deserve the title of Yondaime Hokage, managing to wound me and wrest the fox from my control in one move. But someday it will be mine. The fox and this whole world will bow to my will. Many doors are still left open to me. And just like that, Madara used his jutsu once more to disappear. From his position on the forest floor, Minato glared at where the man had been standing. Something tells me he wasn't lying. Birth of the new Demon King. Hold on. We've got to hold it off until the Yondaime Hokage gets here. A Junin, bleeding from a slight head wound, shouted to his comrades in arms as they charged the viscous beast once more. Just behind them, a career Chunin grabbed the young Iruka who tried to follow his dad after his mother was no longer amongst the living, having died to protect her son from falling debris. He protested, proclaiming that his parents were still out there and that he needed to be with them. Kuchio's no jutsu. Everyone heard. With a large plume of smoke, the large toad, Gamabunta appeared with the Yondaime atop his head, landing directly on the fox's shoulders and subsequently driving the most powerful of the Biju into the earth. Unfortunately, the beast was in the middle of charging up one of its devastating chakra sphere blasts. Hold down the fox for just a minute. Minato yelled out to his longtime partner. I may be big, but I'm not a miracle worker, was the protesting reply. I need enough chakra to take him and that blast out of here. In a last-ditch attempt to destroy everything, the fox swiveled its head around and lined its mouth in the direction of a tired and scraped-up Sandaime Hokage whose eyes widened in fear as the fox prepared to detonate. He was saved a second later when Gamabunta landed on the ground with a resounding thud, as Minato used his Hiraishin to transport the fox and attack away from the village. Minato. Hiruzen tried to figure out what happened. Did he teleport himself and the Kyuubi? He was answered immediately when the fox's attack detonated over 10 miles away. Out there. Birth of the new Demon King. With an incredibly loud rumble, the fox collapsed on the ground after its rather quick transfer. It took it a minute to figure out where it was at, and the only thing it could see of human construction were a small group of houses that it chose to smash with its paw. But unfortunately for the angry Biju, Minato was able to rescue his wife and son from certain death and held onto them as he appeared in a tree via the use of Shunshin. Gotta put up a barrier. Minato groaned as he began to feel the drain on his chakra from all of his quick movements, coupled with the oppressive aura that radiated from the beast. My chakra's almost drained, Kushina mentioned, the bags under her eyes as pronounced as the tiny whisker marks that adorned their baby's cheeks. With a strained effort, Minato erected an intertwining cage-like barrier that prevented the fox from escaping, and Kushina used what chakra she could spare to use the Uzumaki clan's Kekai Genkai to produce chakra chains that wound around the fox and held it in place. The Kyuubi began to struggle against its bindings, and roared angrily. It had just gotten out of that damn woman, it had important things to do and these ninja were getting in its way. Kushina then dropped to her hands and knees and began to tremble in her efforts to keep her once prisoner at bay, and, surprisingly, that much quieter thud was what woke Naruto into a ear-piercing wail. In panic, Minato cried out to his wife, Kushina. Sorry Naruto. I didn't. She huffed, ignoring her spouse in favor of looking at her baby for a few more minutes, mean to wake you. Kushina, Minato muttered, as he began to understand what his wife was thinking. Now, she turned to him and confirmed his worst fear as she spoke, I'll drag the Kyuubi back, and die with it inside me. That'll prevent it from coming back. For a while, it's the only way to save you both, with the little bit of chakra I have left. Thank you for everything. She finished speaking with a kilowatt smile that left Minato gasping in sadness. Kushina, you made me your husband. You made me into the Yondaime Hokage. You made me this boy's father. And I. She cut him off from his rant as the baby in his arm cried out in discontent. Don't look so sad, Minato. I'm happy. Happy that you loved me. Happy that it's our son's birthday TTE Bane. If I try to imagine surviving, and the three of us, living together, I can't think of anything beyond, I'd be so happy. Try as he might, Minato could not stop the swelling tears from falling down his face as he too pictured the scene in his mind. If I had any regrets, Kushina stated as she looked at the newborn in his father's arms, it would be that I won't see Naruto grow up. With a sigh, Minato wiped the tears from his eyes and spoke out, Kushina, you don't need to take the fox down with you. We can use the last of our chakra to see Naruto one more time. Huh, that word said it all. She was confused beyond all get out. I'll seal the last of your chakra in Naruto using the Hake no Fuin Shiki. Then I'll lead the fox away with a seal only a non-Jinchuriki like me can use, the Shiki Fuin. But that, the user will be. He continued, but I'll only be able to seal half the fox's power. It's just too great, it's physically and conceptually impossible to completely seal it all. I can't let the Kyuubi be revived without a Jinchuriki, the balance of Biju will be destroyed. But with the Shiki Fuin I can permanently seal half the fox's power along with myself. And the remaining half. He paused as he remembered something his own sensei, Jiraiya of the Densetsu no Sannin spoke to him when he had just become a ninja, you know, you might actually be the destined child. The what child? He had asked. Sometime in the near future the shinobi world will be faced with disaster, and the destined child will be its savior, Jiraiya had responded. Minato looked down once more and noticed that Naruto had cried himself back to sleep and finished his train of thought concerning Naruto and the fox. I'll seal the remaining half inside Naruto with the Hake no Fuin Shiki. Kushina looked like she was about to protest but Minato explained, I know what you want to say, but Jiraiya-sensei spoke of the world undergoing a revolution, and with it, a great disaster. Tonight I've confirmed two things. The first is that masked man, the one who attacked you, he is the harbinger of that disaster. And Naruto will be the one to stop him. The Jinchuriki who will blaze the trail to the future. I just know it. At this time, with his trusty companion Enma in his staff form, Sandaime Hokage Sarutobi Hiruzen landed in a crouch just outside the barrier that Minato used to protect the rest of the world from the fox's destructive capabilities. Back in the barrier, Kushina watched as Naruto was laid on the ground and tried to protest again, but Minato merely flashed through the 9-hand seals to mold his chakra to summon the Shinigami. As the spectral spirit eater materialized behind him, visible to only himself, he said with a smile, have a little faith. He is our son after all. After I finish the Shiki Fuin, I'll place your remaining chakra into Naruto as well. You'll meet the grown-up Naruto sooner than you think. The time will come when he'll attempt to take control of the fox's power. I want you there to help him. Our son. That's why. I don't want him to bear such a heavy burden all on his own. Minato retorted before sighing and looking down at the near-helpless forms of his tired wife and sleeping child. Kushina, though, decided to argue the point anyways, now that Minato had finished his speech. But why? Why the Shiki Fuin? There's no reason for you to die. just so I can see him for a few minutes when he's older. I wanted you to be there for him. I wanted you to raise him. Why? Why are you sacrificing Naruto just to preserve the balance of the Biju? To save the village? To save the country? Why are you sacrificing yourself for me? Turning your back on the village, on the country, is just as bad as abandoning a child. You should understand. You saw your own country fall apart. You know the pain of growing up without a home of your own, and you know that we are a family of shinobi. Kushina would have likely argued, but settled for a glare as her spouse continued to try and justify what he was about to do. Besides, even if I lived, I could never be a substitute for you. What? There are things Naruto needs to be told, things I could never say myself. That's the mother's job, and I need you to carry it out even if you only have the briefest of moments to do so. This isn't just for you, this is for Naruto. At this point he knelt down and picked up his baby once more and settled right in front of his wife. Dying to make life better for his son. That's the stuff you let the father handle. Understanding slowly began to manifest itself on her face, but Kushina tried so steal her eyes in a last-ditch effort to go with her plan and save her son the life of many Jinchuriki since the first ones of ages long past, a life of neglect and hatred. She was one of the very few to have been lucky to have missed. But her husband would not be deterred and held the visage that struck fear into the hearts of many of Iwa's shinobi during the Third Great War. From his position, Sarutobi was finally able to get a glance of something and in fear he gasped, those markings, it can't be, the Shikifuan. Before he could do anything else, two of the village's Junin jumped down beside their previous military commander. What's happening, Sandame? We're too late, he answered. They've put up a barrier around the Kyuubi. Whatever they're doing it alone. With a cry, he tried to use his own chakra to force his way into the barrier and help the Namikaze family. Now, the devourer of spirits was ready and thrust his hand through Minato's stomach from behind and out the front and grabbed onto the monstrosity that towered over him. The fox, unable to speak because of Kushina's chakra bindings, mentally cursed as it felt its power being ripped in two. Fuan! Minato exclaimed, and the fox roared as it felt half of its life force, forcibly rent asunder from its body and pulled away, with no way to prevent it. Gasping, Minato thought, my body's gone numb, what a heavy chakra. It is the Shikifuan. I can't believe he actually used it. Sarutobi breathed in shock. It was the most powerful self-sacrificial jutsu for a reason, but to see such a powerful sealing jutsu used against a Biju was breathtakingly scary. But the fox remains. He didn't seal all of it. One of the Junin cried out. But it's shrunk. No amount of emotional training could have stopped the confusion that laced his voice. Now for the 8 trigrams seal. Minato called out. I'm going to seal the Kyuubi inside Naruto. A puff of smoke followed and a ritual-style altar appeared. From its now shrunken size, the Kyuubi was able to recognize the altar as the ceremonial throne, and realized now that Minato was truly intent on sealing it within the blonde babe. It began to look hopeless for the beast, but Kushina's chakra and strength began to fade as she started to wobble and be racked with searing coughs that in turn caused her control over the chakra chains to lessen just enough for the Kyuubi to try and counterattack the Yondaime and his wife. Kushina, stay with me. Minato hollered as he quickly turned from the throne he had just laid Naruto on. The Kyuubi raised its right forepaw in preparation to slam its paw down. However, its efforts were in vain as Minato was able to grab hold of his wife and threw himself in line with the demon's claw and used his own body to stop the claw from attacking his son, and Kushina was able to refocus enough to re-ensnare the beast once more, ensuring its unwilling stillness. The blood-soaked claw stopped a mere 3 inches above Naruto's chin and the dying parents breathed a sigh of relief. If the father can do his job, Minato said, trying to alleviate some stress. Kushina picked up on it, and completed the thought, that the mother should be even better, right? Sarutobi was astounded, is that their child? They protected it, a Junin stated. Damned humans. The Kyuubi growled in indignation. Ignoring the fox, Kushina glanced behind her where her husband was impaled on the claw directly behind her, as she sat on said claw and rasped, you win, first argument, you've ever won, I guess, you're really serious. He chuckled, thank you, Kushina. Working as quickly as he could, Minato quickly summoned a toad. Said toad looked around and freaked, ah, the Kyuubi. And Yondaime, what the hell happened to you? Gamatora, I'm entrusting you with the key to this seal, Minato spoke, forced to work fast as his life force waned. Hurry to Jiraiya-sensei. Store it within him. With that, he plunged his hand into the toad's gut which caused a scroll to wrap around him and extend his height to that of a full-grown man. From his spot, Sarutobi finally pieced together the puzzle. I see, Minato intends to save the village by making his son the new Jinchuriki. Got it. Gamatora proclaimed as the seal's key rolled up on the scroll. Good. Goodbye. That does it, Minato muttered as the toad disappeared to carry out its mission. It's time for me to go, Kushina. I'm going to perform the 8 trigrams seal, and try to leave a little of my own chakra in Naruto too. We don't have much time. if you have anything to say to Naruto. Kushina bowed her head in understanding, too tired to nod fully and huffed out with the last of her strength. Naruto, don't be a fussy eater, eat a lot and grow up to be a big boy. Take your bath every day, go to bed early and sleep well. Make friends, it doesn't matter how many, just make sure they're real friends, people you can trust, even a few is enough. And study your ninjutsu. I was never very good at it, maybe you will be. Everyone has things they're good and things they're not. Don't feel bad if you can't do it all. Make sure to listen to your teachers at the academy. And remember to avoid the 3 vices of shinobi. Don't borrow money if you can help it. Save what you earn from missions. No drinking alcohol until you're 20, and don't overdo it or you'll ruin your body. And as for women, well, I'm a woman so I don't know what to say, but there are only men and women in the world, so be nice to Mei-chan. She doesn't seem to be too weird, she's a lot like me. And the 4th warning, watch out for Jiraiya-sensei. She paused to smile as blood poured out of her mouth as it rose up from the pit of her stomach and spoke again with tears streaming down her face. Naruto, you're going to experience a lot of pain and suffering, remember who you are. Find a goal, a dream, and don't stop trying until it comes true. There's so much more I want to say, to teach you about. I want to stay with you. I love you. Minato sighed but kept his mouth shut and Kushina realized, I'm sorry Minato, I took all our time. It's okay, he supplied. Naruto, this is your dad. Listen to your motor mouth mother. Hake Fuin.